The manga starts with a radiant morning, and the small village of Adria is seen. Beneath the protective shadow of the church, these boys engage in a spirited dance, their wooden swords clashing and echoing with youthful exuberance. One has dark hair, the other red hair, and within seconds, the one with darker hair disarms his opponent and manages to knock him to the ground. Clearly, he is the better swordsman of them both, and as he knocks down his comrade, the red-haired boy complains about the carelessness of his more talented friend. The more talented, darker-haired boy is named Russell, and the red-haired boy is named Vince. As Vince gets up again, Russell smirks at him and starts to gloat about having won yet another sword match. In reply, Vince grins back and promises his friend that he will take him down the next time they spar. While both friends gloat and tease each other, another voice suddenly approaches, this one belonging to a wide-eyed girl with blonde hair. As she approaches the duo, she smiles brightly and then enthusiastically tells Russell to fight her next. To this, Vince smiles some more and then brightly replies that she shouldn't even think of fighting Russell, given that he's the most talented of them all, and that he would only humiliate her. However, the girl named Emmy snaps at Vince and informs him that she doesn't care about that. Ignoring their verbal exchange, Russell faces Emmy and points out to Vince that she sometimes has good sparring moves as well. On hearing this, Emmy blushes at the validation of her skills, and Vince turns to another girl sitting at the far end, telling her not to bury her nose in books too much. True to his words, this girl, a white-haired young girl named Janet, is sitting away from the group, seemingly disinterested in whatever they have to say. Her face buried in a book she seems to be very interested in. Despite Vince's words that they have to work together, Janet continues to ignore the other three, and after a while, Russell notices this and then asks her what the matter is. In reply, Janet responds that there are people gathering at the front door of the church, and that these are probably the people who went for the goddess's choice ceremony, and are probably just returning from the event. On hearing this, the other three stop their discussion, and together, the four of them head towards the door, where the rest of the village is congregating. As they approach the place, they hear the whispers of the gathered, making out the new titles that have been handed out to the other young people who have come of age. Some of them have become wizards, fighters, knights, and so on, and a lot of them are thankful to the goddess for blessing them with good jobs now that they are adults. As these people talk amongst each other, our protagonists start to whisper to each other again. For clarification, it seems like this happens every year in the village. When young people come of age, they are sent to the goddess's choice ceremony, and at this event, the goddess bestows ranks and titles on them. These ranks and titles determine the roles they would play for the rest of their lives, and these roles would be the roles they would play when they go on missions with other people. On hearing the new titles that have been given, Russell heaves a sigh of relief that the goddess hasn't yet chosen a hero in their generation. Apparently, there can only be one hero, and he is looking forward to becoming that hero. On the other hand, Vince too wants to become the hero, and on hearing his friend's sigh of relief, he teases Russell that he will become the hero, and mentions that he cannot wait to turn 16, so that he can be given a job as well. This makes Russell snap at him, and he counters that he would be the hero too. With a grin on his face, he confides to them that this is why he practices with the sword every day, and that he is doing that because he is sure the goddess is watching his efforts and taking note of his determination. On seeing his friend's determined drive, Vince smiles at him and promises that if that is the case, he will do his best to help Russell become a hero. He promises his friend that he will pray to the goddess every day so that when the time comes, he can be chosen as the hero. At this declaration, Emmy chimes in and mentions that she would like to be the hero too, but Russell reiterates with a bright smile that he wishes it would be him instead. At this point, Janet chimes in and reminds Emmy that only one person can be a hero, and Emmy asks her if what she's saying is true. While the group of friends talk amongst each other, another group of children head towards their way and catch their attention. As they approach Russell and his friends, they begin to tease them amongst themselves about being orphans. Vince overhears them saying this, and with anger he turns towards them with his wooden practice sword, and faces them in a threatening manner. On seeing this, Russell advises the new kids not to mess with Vince, but the ringleader of the new set of kids only replies in indignation. This new kid goes on to make fun of them for not having any parents at all, and as such, he asserts that they are not worthy of respect. On hearing this, Emmy begins to cry, but Vince only brushes off their harsh words and retorts back that the fact that they do not have parents doesn't mean that they are stupid. Furthermore, he tells them that they aren't any better than he and his friends just because they do not have a family. On the other hand, Russell looks at Emmy crying and then faces the new set of kids with a poker face. He ignores them, then turns back to his friends and asks them to become a family with him. His friends look touched by this, and even Emmy stops sobbing for a while. On noticing their silence, he speculates out loud, wondering if that would be a good idea. But before he finishes talking, Vince chimes in and declares that this is a good idea and that he likes it. Emmy and Janet also concur with the idea, and just like that, the four of them become a family, inseparable, and bound by their shared experiences as kids. Years down the line, it is time for their age group to finally become chosen by the goddess for their jobs down in the city of Hammond, which is illuminated by the goddess herself. The four friends travel there for the goddess's choice ceremony, and they're finally grown up, almost 10 years down the line. Initially, it is projected that Russell would be the hero, while his other friends have their own ambitions, and this is the moment that they have been training for years. On arrival at Hammond, though, things don't go as planned. The years of preparation, though gone through with grit and determination, have all been reduced to ashes. Vince, instead of Russell, is chosen as the hero. Emmy is given the title of a paladin, a warrior known for her acute defensive capabilities, who is also quite adept at offense. Janet, on the other hand, is chosen as the sage, a magic user who is very good at attacking with spells. Despite his hard work and determination, coupled with the years of prayers and supplication to the goddess, Russell is chosen as the saint, a magic user who uses a staff and doesn't have any offensive or defensive capabilities, save for a few healing abilities. As they stand at the altar in front of the priest, all friends look at him with shock on their faces. Though they are all given the highest jobs possible, this news comes as a shock to all of them, most of all Russell. Although the priest mentions his admiration for the four, especially at the fact that they have a hero in their group, he also confides in them that he didn't know that having a saint was possible again. Though it is a rare role, it is not satisfactory to Russell in the slightest. Although he is shocked that the hero isn't him, Russell politely asks the priest what a saint is. At this, the priest informs him that the saint is the male equivalent role of the saintess, which appears in the legends. Apparently, when things were harsh and the Demon King tormented the world, the saintess was the one who defeated the Demon King alongside the legendary hero. With a series of miracles, the saintess was able to help the hero to subdue the Demon King. After telling this story, the priest informs Russell that the saint is a divine messenger chosen by the sun goddess and a person who is now above all other priests. It is a role that enables a person to be an expert in all forms of remedial magic that can cure any wounds or illnesses. Before long, Russell accepts his fate and decides to become the saint of the group. A while later, after the group leaves Hammond and is about to start going on missions, Vince and the rest of the crew approach Russell and ask him if he has gotten his equipment ready. They are apparently at an equipment store, and Russell replies to them that he will pick the same equipment that they have picked. At this, Vince throws him a necklace with a tag, and when he asks what it is, Vince replies that it is a method of identification that will show everyone else that he is on the same team as them. Emmy, on the other hand, expresses excitement for the exploration of their first dungeon, and Vince assures her that since he is a hero, everything will be fine, and that nobody should worry about anything. At this, he turns to Russell and informs him that he doesn't have to fight since he is a saint. He reminds him that the role of the saint is a support role, and that all he needs to do is prevent the others from getting hurt. Although Russell looks bummed at hearing this, he then asks Vince excitedly if he can be allowed to use a sword. This makes Vince alarmed, and he expresses vehemently that the group doesn't have the luxury of having the healer of the group on the front. At this, Janet chimes in, and then tells Russell that if the healer is hurt, the entire group can collapse. Not understanding the situation, Emmy then chimes in as well, and reiterates that since she is a paladin, she would do well to protect Russell. She then tells Russell to stay behind her and focus on healing only. Of course, Russell is very sad at this new development. His friends are right that the role of saints is a healing role, and as such, these highly important individuals are not supposed to be allowed to fight. He begins to reflect on the start of his situation. Although the saint is the highest-rated job in the world alongside the hero, it is not the ideal role for him, who had been preparing to be the hero, or at least in an offensive role all his life. He begins to think that being a saint as an orphan might be a step up, but at the same time, it isn't really what he wants. However, He then resolves to make the most of the situation with gratitude, and then promises himself to protect his friends with the power of the saint from now on. However, it doesn't take long for trouble to loom on the horizon. Despite the fact that he had chosen to be content with his role as a saint, it doesn't take more than a few missions before Vince pushes for the group to banish Russell from their fold. Apparently, despite the fact that Russell is doing his best, the fact remains that the healing magic isn't initially of much value to the group at all. At the start of the exploration of the dungeons, Russell is able to use the spell Heal to keep his teammates alive, and initially, all of them are duly impressed by it. They are happy that they don't have to worry about wounds much, and they are all content to be reliant on their buddy, who is the saint of the group. However, as they progress, it soon becomes clear that their party is the strongest in the region, given the fact that they all have the highest level jobs, and they are able to defeat demons in the dungeons without having any injuries at all. All apart from Russell, though, who is able to only sit by the sidelines and watch his friends dispatch demons with ease. His recovery magic never comes into play once, and to add insult to injury, by the time the group has finished clearing the lower levels of the dungeon, other members of the group have also leveled up and begun to learn recovery magic of their own. Additionally, the only person who is not able to earn any new recovery magic is Saint Russell himself. Within a few more days, Vince starts to deviously push for Russell's banishment from the group. On hearing this, Emmy is the first to protest, and she points out that she can't believe that Vince is trying to kick Russell out of the group. But it seems that Vince has already come up with all the possible counters for his friends should any protest arise. To Emmy's indignation, he points out that he is only saying this for Russell's sake. As they progress, the dungeon levels will only become tougher and tougher, and the enemies will become more dangerous than usual. Pursuant to this, he points out that since Russell cannot fight, he would only be a liability to the team. To further his point, he mentions that in the fight today, Emmy was put in danger simply because she was protecting him, and from there, he mentions that unlike the rest of them, who can heal and fight on their own, a saint who can only heal is nothing but a hindrance. As he says this, Russell watches him with a defeated look, not saying anything to defend himself. While he does this, Vince continues to berate him. Vince faces Emmy and Janet and informs them that he always has to protect Russell while he does nothing, and that in addition to this, Russell is still on a low level for a saint. At this, he points out that even Russell is no match for Emmy the Paladin at this point. On hearing this, Russell becomes outraged and reminds Vince that when they were kids, he used to be the strongest and the best swordsman, but this doesn't make Vince budge at all. Ignoring Russell's outrage, he then dares Russell to fight against Emmy to prove himself, and he also promises that if he can perform well against Emmy in the defense position, he will be allowed to stay back in the group. After this declaration, Vince turns to Janet and asks her if she considers these to be fair terms, and Janet replies that Russell is too weak and that she doesn't think he would make it. Vince smiles deviously on hearing this, and then he reiterates that if Russell gets wounded against Emmy, he must go back to the village and retire there. The match starts, and Emmy gets into a defensive stance behind her shield while Russell rushes her. The fight is over in a few seconds, and soon after, the night gives way to a new day. The next day, Russell wakes up in the inn alone near the window. He wakes up with a start, ready to attack whoever is close to him, but when he notices that it is the sun, he calms down. At this, the events of the previous day start rushing to him, and after a while, he remembers the encounter with Emmy, and then looks around the room to assess his new situation. He is the only one left in the room, the others having packed their things and left the night before. As he looks at his chest, he notices that the badge that Vince had initially given him is gone, and it starts to dawn on him that his friends have truly left him behind. Although he is sad when he remembers that he lost to Emmy, a slight smile comes to his face, and he whispers that this is the best goodbye that he could expect from her. On another closer inspection of the room, he notices a full bag of coins on the table and realizes that his former friends had left him with enough money to utilize until he found something else to do with his time. Going on, he further reflects on the fact that Emmy had knocked him into the wall, and that despite that, he didn't feel any broken bones or injuries. It then dawns on him that she had dispatched him easily and with care, and a part of him is grateful to her for being nice to him despite the situation at hand. However, he also reflects on the irony of the fact that despite his position as a saint, he still isn't able to cast healing spells. The uselessness of his abilities engulfs him, and he starts to remember Vince's harsh words to him. After much reflection, he decides to go home for good. Within a few days, Russell is back home, standing in front of the village and still lost in thought. As he traverses his hometown once again, he looks to the sky and wonders why the goddess gave him the job of a saint, especially when he was better suited to a combat role. He had wanted to become like the heroes in the legends, and to this effect, he had been training ever since he had been able to pick up a sword. Not only had he been training, but he was also a natural talent, and would always have the upper hand in a fight against his friends. Now though, Vince is the hero, and he is relegated to a support role without any attack capabilities. As he thinks about these developments, he wonders what the difference is between Vince and him. Going on, he wonders if the priest or the goddess had intentionally switched their jobs when they went for the goddess choice ceremony, especially since it was clear that he used to be far stronger than Vince. And despite the fact that the saints are supposedly the messengers of the Russell, still doesn't know why she chose Vince over him. Because of this, he is starting to undergo some changes that he never knew he could go through before. He used to be someone who had absolute faith in the goddess and her abilities, her wisdom, and her discretion. Now though, with the fact that she put him in a support role instead of a combat one, her abilities are now being called into question by Russell himself. He begins to regret having put his faith in her at all, and after a while, he begins to hate the goddess vehemently. There is a dark look on his face as he begins to walk through the village on the way back to the orphanage he came from. Soon after, he stumbles upon a little girl, crying for someone to help her. Russell then walks up to her and asks her if she is lost, but the little girl, unable to respond coherently due to her tears, only replies by calling her mother's name. At this point, Russell finally recognizes her as the daughter of the agricultural overseer in the village, and he begins to wonder why she is so far away from there. In order to placate her, he kneels down on one knee to face her squarely, and then he asks her where her parents are. To this, she replies that her mom is now sick, that nobody knows the cause of the illness, and that nobody in the village has any cure or can do anything about it. On hearing this, Russell then asks her where her father is, and he wonders what the man would be doing at a time like this, but the girl only responds that she doesn't have a father. This makes Russell come to the realization that if she loses her mother as well, she will become an orphan like him. This strengthens his resolve, and he vows within himself not to abandon her. He then gets up to his feet and asks her to lead him to her house. He tells her that he is a healer, and then also promises her that he is going to try his best to help her as well. A few hours later, they reach her side of the village, and they are met by a crowd of people who have gathered to look for the young girl whose name is Brenda. It seems like it is a search party, and within seconds, the people gathered notice that Brenda is with Russell, the orphan boy from the church. Before they can say anything though, Brenda and Russell rush past them, and when the people try to question Russell, he brusquely replies that he is in a hurry and he needs to be somewhere soon. They soon get to the girl's home, and she screams for her mom who is still bedridden. The woman looks very ill, and she is clearly fighting to hang on to life. This becomes clear to Russell, and he correctly deduces that her illness is very serious, and that she cannot even breathe properly. He begins to wonder whether he even has the power to save her, considering that even his friends had to throw him away from their group. Although he contemplates the fact that his low-level magic may not have any effect on the sick woman, he is snapped to reality by the young girl's loud screams, replete with agony that she may never see her mom again. This brings Russell back to reality, and he resolves to save the woman. With a voice of authority, he tells Brenda not to wander off, and he brings out his staff to start working his magic. Before he works his magic, he promises himself that he will never let another child become an orphan like him. After all, he may have no attack capabilities, but he is in the same title as the legendary saint, the holy messenger chosen by the sun goddess herself. The saint has the power to heal any wounds or illnesses, and is also an expert in healing magic. All these thoughts go through his mind as he begins to work his magic over the woman, deciding to call deep within himself for the powers he has been given. With a loud voice, he points his staff at the woman and begins to use the spell, Cure. Suddenly, a bright light fills the cottage, and the glare of the light reaches the village. It catches the attention of a young girl who clearly is a magician as well. She turns in the direction of the bright light, then mutters to herself that it can't be. Meanwhile, back in the cottage, Russell continues to use the cure spell in an effort to brighten the health of the sick woman. As he does so, there seems to be no effect, so he becomes sad and starts to think about how he is still a low-level saint who cannot use any advanced level sorcery. On the other hand, Brenda has stopped crying, and she has begun to look hopeful for her mom's recovery, and this encourages Russell to believe that the magic he has may still work on the woman. With this thought in mind, he continues to spread his magic around the woman, and soon after, she sits upright in bed, and with a weak but encouraging smile on her face, she admits that she does feel better than before. She clearly is no longer as ill as before again. On seeing this, Russell becomes relieved, and Brenda asks her mom if she is now okay. To this, the woman offers a tiny smile and apologizes to her daughter for scaring her. She also assures her that Mummy is now going to be fine, and at this, Brenda's eyes well with tears again. She pounces on her mom and wraps the woman in a very tight hug, now relieved that her mom is going to stay alive again. Russell watches this with a non-committal glance, and the woman then turns to face her attention to him. She begins by trying to confirm with him if he is from the orphanage, and then she asks him if he is with Vince. Back when Russell was at the orphanage, he didn't really interact with people outside of it, and he only played around with Vince, Emmy, and Janet. However, despite this, the story of Vince as the hero had spread, and it was within reason that the woman was now asking him if he was with Vince again. She couldn't have known who the saint was because apparently it was a smaller role than usual. Regardless of his thoughts, he informs the woman that his name is Russell, and then the woman thanks him very much for his service. She then tells him that her name is Victoria, and again, she introduces her daughter Brenda, who is smiling at her mom's face, to Russell all over again. The woman then thanks him again, but she mentions that she doesn't have money to pay for the treatment he has just given her. On hearing this, Russell tells her that there is no need for payment, seeing as he had just used simple healing magic. On hearing this, though, Victoria yells that he isn't telling her the truth. Apparently, she was in great pain and seemed to be on the brink of passing away, and despite this, Russell's magic was able to cure her easily. She rationalized that it couldn't have been basic magic, considering the fact that he had healed her so easily. She then goes on to point out that the great goddess must have given him some kind of special role. But on hearing this, Russell fixes her with a disbelieving look on his face. Not noticing this, Victoria then asks what she can do to thank such a magnificent person. But Russell only reiterates that he actually used basic magic to cure her. However, he begins to reflect on the cure spell and the possibilities that can be attained by using that spell. Apparently, it is a healing spell that removes poisons, and it is usually learned by the saint at level 2. Regardless of this, he didn't feel like it was an achievement because it was learned by Janet the Sage as well. He reflects back to the time when he first found out that Janet learned recovery magic as well. It was a bad feeling, and now that he was reflecting on it, he felt a sinking feeling as dour as the time when he was with his crew. Meanwhile, Brenda has been watching him with bright eyes. She is no longer crying, and now that she can see that her mother is well, she is now back to her childlike peace again. She breaks into Russell's thoughts, and with a bright smile, she thanks him for helping her mother. Despite this, Russell was still of the opinion that the recovery magic he had was still not a bountiful skill because it had yielded no results when he was with his crew. Chalking it up to a combination of bad luck, he becomes even angrier at his situation in life. However, a new thought was beginning to occur to him. Back when he was kicked out of the group, he wasn't sure what the next step was or what he was going to do with the rest of his life. As he watched Victoria and Brenda, though, mother and daughter, now happy after undergoing a period of turmoil together, he was starting to think about staying in a town and being a priest in the town. At that point, Victoria chimes in and mentions that she had never thought she would be able to fall this ill, and then Russell asks her what had caused the illness, and that Brenda had told him that the cause was unknown. At first, Victoria is silent, but after a while she confides in him that a dungeon has appeared near their village. On hearing this, Russell immediately becomes alert and a little bit confused. On the other hand, Victoria continues to talk, and she admits that she had initially tried to check it out, but that she had gotten hurt, and as a result, she had fallen ill the next day. This whole situation doesn't make sense to Russell, and he then begins to wonder if this is another one of the destiny paths set by the goddess. Considering he now sees her as cruel, it was very ironic that he had been kicked out of the group because he wasn't able to fight in a combat role, and now, after heading back home, it was an actual dungeon that awaited him here. At this, he begins to wonder why, because everything seems to be weird. Dungeons usually only appeared in places that were important, and it seemed a stretch that a dungeon was now appearing near the town of Arya, which was a remote location far from civilization. At this, he begins to wonder if he should go and check out the dungeon himself. But then he dismisses the thought because it was pointless to go into a dungeon full of monsters when he was only a healer who couldn't even put up a good fight. In spite of his reservations, he begins to wonder if the people at the orphanage will eventually be all right. Minutes later, he arrives at the door of the orphanage. It's been 6 months since he was last here, and after waiting at the door for a moment, he resolves to leave again. But just then, the door opens to reveal a loud voice shouting at him not to leave until the person has talked to him. Exasperatedly, Russell opens his eyes to see that it is the matron of the place, an old woman who basically acted as his mother all those years alongside the other nuns. He remarks wryly that she has gotten stricter, and then the woman notices with shock that it is Russell standing at her door. At this, Russell comments to the woman, whom he calls Grandma Gemma, that he is back, and Grandma Gemma tells him that if he was coming back, he should have contacted her sooner. She then asks him where Vince and the others are, and to this, Russell replies coldly that he is the only one who came back. Initially, Grandma Gemma asks him if he has changed his mind, but Russell evades her question and then points out that a new dungeon has popped up near the village. Grandma Gemma then wonders out loud how he has heard of it. Then she tells him that it has appeared near the village for almost half a year now, and that because of the dungeon, monsters have been appearing in the village at night. Again, she asks him why he is here alone, and then she pushes further by asking him if something happened with Vince and the others. To this, Russell looks back mildly and then comments that it is a bit of a long story. Soon after, the duo sit together around a table, and Russell informs her of what has happened between him and the rest of the crew. On finishing the story, the old woman sighs, and then comments that she cannot believe that something like this has happened to him and his friends, who she once thought were inseparable. As she expresses her displeasure, she lets slip that Vince was worried before he left, and when Russell shows confusion at this, the woman asks rhetorically how it was possible that he didn't know. It is at this point that she confides in him that Vince is an avid womanizer. On hearing this, Russell's initial reaction is comical confusion, but Grandma Gemma goes on to mention that Vince has always wanted Emmy and Janet, and that he was always constantly looking at them when he thought nobody else was looking. According to her, he also never thought that they would notice him, but they did so frequently because apparently girls can notice those kinds of things immediately. As she says this, Russell remains silent, but he is in awe of this new information that he has just received. Apparently, he never noticed this fact about his former friend. Although he never noticed this, Grandma Gemma recalls that when they were younger, Vince had confessed to Emmy that he liked her, but she had turned him down. And this information further confuses Russell because apparently he himself had never noticed any indication of such a relationship between Emmy and Vince. He wasn't aware that she had turned Vince down or that Vince still had feelings for Emmy. And as he reflects on this occurrence, Grandma Gemma goes on to reveal to him that the day after Emmy turned Vince down, the womanizer went and proposed to Janet immediately the next day. These facts continue to confuse Russell because he had never been aware of this side of his former friend. And as he contemplates these situations, he lightly concludes that Vince is not as smart as he thinks. Furthermore, Vince's problems were worsened by the fact that Russell used to be far better than him whenever they sparred. Although Vince was a much larger kid, Russell had no problem knocking him down on most occasions. At this, Grandma Gemma then speculates that this must be why Vince is giving him a hard time. Although Vince wanted to be the best at everything, Russell was better than him at sparring. And whenever they ended their sessions, Vince would go down to the village to throw temper tantrums and hurt the other kids to take out his anger on them. Again, this fact surprises Russell, and for the first time, he becomes aware of a whole side of Vince that he never thought was possible before. After quiet speculation, Russell then informs Grandma Gemma that Vince was the one who kicked him out of the group. And at that, Grandma Gemma hypothesizes that Vince probably did that so that he could be alone with the girls, Emmy and Janet. At first, Russell fumbles with this information. Then he comes to the realization that if Emmy and Janet agreed with Vince's decision to kick him out, then that meant that they preferred to be with Vince than him. However, despite this thought, Russell remembers that the main reason they had let him go was that his powers were of no use to the group, and he beats himself down by thinking that even if Vince hadn't brought it up, he would have left on his own eventually. As if reading his thoughts, Grandma Gemma tells him not to be too hard on himself, and she reminds him that he is a saint, and as such, sisters like her should be thanking him for his service. To this, Russell replies that she shouldn't bother to thank him, and that he wouldn't like to see an old woman kneeling down on his accord. Before he finishes his statement, though, a loud noise is heard from outside. He immediately rushes to the windows, and he finds out that there is a monster attacking the village. It is a scarlet bat from the dungeon, a winged creature big enough to swallow a dog, and it was flying around the village wreaking havoc. Immediately, Russell infers that this is the creature that Grandma Gemma was talking about when she informed him about the nightly attacks, and he immediately resolves to deal with the creature himself. Hoisting his saint staff, he gets ready to deal with the threat, but before he leaves the orphanage, Grandma Gemma yells in his direction, worried that he is going over to confront the creature without a proper weapon. She urges him to take a sword at least, and this finally gains his attention. Initially, he responds that he is a saint, and therefore cannot use a sword, but Grandma Gemma immediately chides him for having such a defeatist mentality. She reminds him that he has been training with a sword longer than she has been using a staff, and at this, he smiles at the sword that she gives him, his own sword from when he was still at the orphanage. He promises that he is only borrowing it, then leaves the room. He then runs out of the orphanage and moves to face the creature, which is already busy destroying buildings. The urgency is pressing, and as soon as he goes outside, he notices a girl with a dagger trying to face the creature alone. This is the same girl who noticed the bright light from earlier when he was healing Victoria, but he doesn't know that, and on reaching her, he puts himself between her and the creature, and then yells at her to back off. Just then, the creature squares off against the both of them, and as Russell gets ready to pull out his sword, he begins to wonder when he last got the privilege to use one. There is still a bit of sentiment surrounding this sword, which is the same one he used to use before the goddess choice ceremony. It was a sword that he had forged himself in admiration of the hero or legend, and he remembers having hoped that he would be able to slay monsters with it. As the creature moves to attack, he readies the sword, almost bringing it out of his sheath, and he thinks about the fact that he had always dreamed of being a hero, and had frequently without any rest. Dispatching a creature like this would be quite easy for him. As the scarlet bat rushes him and attacks, he frees the sword from its sheath and slices it across the air, using both his sword and the creature's momentum to maximize the blow, and thereby cutting the creature in half easily. He gets a tiny cut on his face, but immediately uses the heal spell to seal the wound. He then turns back to look at the dead creature, and he becomes proud that even a saint like him can fight and slay a creature from a dungeon. Just then, he hears a noise behind him, and then he turns to meet the girl he had helped face to face. He asks her if she is okay, but instead, she rushes towards him, and with a bright, almost insane look in her eyes, she demands to know if he believes in the goddess. This question takes him aback, but he immediately begins to reflect on the number of things he has lost because of the goddess. First of all, he was a saint, because the goddess chose him for a different path than the one he wanted, and along the line, he also had to give up his dreams, and was eventually kicked out by people he considered to be his own family. He had nothing to himself now because of the goddess, and he had basically lost everything. The question makes his heart burn with hatred, and he grits his teeth in anger. To answer the girl's question, he vehemently expresses to her that he hates the goddess. However, though the girl becomes less enthusiastic, she keeps a bright-eyed look on her face. Though he replies with fervent hatred, he reflects further on the question as he wakes up the next morning, recalling the time when he actually used to believe very much in the goddess. A memory comes back to him, a memory of not too long ago when he was still exploring dungeons with the crew, and then resting in towns after they were done. Back then, he, alongside Vince, Emmy, and Janet, was confronted by a group of people wearing scarlet robes with hoods over their faces. They were asked by this group if they believed in a god, and before they could even answer, the group's leader had already started to proselytize, talking about the goddess's watchful eye over all of them. In response to this waylay, Janet simply pulled her witch's hat over her eyes and turned her back to the group, asking her friends to do the same as they had more important things to do. Although Vince had tried to hold her back, they eventually left the group alone, and Janet began to explain the reason for her brusque reply to them. Apparently, these people were called the Red Salvation Society, and they were, according to her, a new conspiratorial religion that expanded on the doctrines of the religion of the sun goddess. Their job was to get new recruits for their little group, and they did this by telling people that the goddess was thinking ahead, and then convincing people to join based on that conjecture. At this, she asks Vince what would happen when a person enters the group, and Janet replies that after being led to believe in a new doctrine, they would say that the goddess saves only the faithful, and from that moment, they begin to charge membership fees, essentially preying on the members' fear of alienation to squeeze money out of them. The money they asked for was 30 pieces of silver a month, and the more a member gave money to the cause, the higher the person was in rank amongst the brethren. Although the baseline money of 30 pieces of silver was easily paid, many were able to join the group and easily keep up with the group's activities. After explaining this, Janet turns specifically to Russell and then tells him that he is very kind, but that he, especially, should be very careful with the group. Retreating from his memory, he walks down the staircase from his room and then turns his thoughts to more pressing matters, including his expulsion from his group, the new dungeon, and now the apparent application of religion to a goddess that he hates. As he leaves the house, he eventually meets the girl he met from the day before outside. She is currently playing with the kids from the orphanage, and on seeing him, she asks him for confirmation on if he is Russell. Although he isn't particularly pleased to see her, he wonders how she is able to get along with the kids so well. He then asks her if she is from the Red Salvation Society, and on hearing the accusatory tone in his voice, she frowns at him, and then asks him what he is talking about. Moreover, she asks him why he would think a beautiful woman like her would be found in the Red Salvation Society. And it is at this point that he comes to the realization that she is not wearing the same hooded red robes that those people wore when they accosted him and his former friends. All their clothes are blue, as opposed to the red garb of the society, and he then apologizes to her for being mistaken. She accepts his apology, then comments that if he finds it easy to apologize, she is sure he is a good person. However, one more thing is called into question. Russell begins to wonder why she asked if he believes in the goddess, when she herself is not a member of the Red Salvation Society in the first place. Although he doesn't have the answers, she interrupts his thoughts by asking him what he intends to do today. To this, he replies that he is going to explore the dungeon, and further explains that he wouldn't like for the village to have any more victims like Brenda's mom, Victoria. And again, the fact that the monster appeared in the village at such a time means that checking out the dungeon is of the utmost priority. On hearing this, the girl happily informs him that she would like to go with him. Just then, he asks her why she would do that, but she interrupts him by telling him her name, which is Sibylla. She then further explains that she is not like him, but despite her introduction, he refuses to let her follow him into the dungeon. She's taken aback by this, and she asks him why, but she doesn't even wait for him to respond, before she informs him that she is going to follow him despite the fact that he doesn't like it. At this, Russell designs his fate and doesn't say anything to counter her. Eventually, they start their adventure by heading to the Adventurers Guild, in Adria's section, where they would be able to register the things they would need for their adventures. Sibylla informs him first that they are going to create a new party together, and though he makes a noise of protest, she informs him that it would be safer for both of them to enter the dungeon as a group than to enter as individuals. This prompts Russell to evaluate her level and status. Apparently, the powers that were given to them by the goddess have growth value that is considered to be the level of the player. Russell first remembers that she was fighting with a dagger when they first met, and he finally figures out that she is a level 8 mage. In response, she, in turn, points out that he is a level 5 saint, and she comments that such is too low a level to enter the dungeon. However, she is taken aback by his status, and the fact that he is not only a priest but a saint, which is a much higher and more important role than a priest. After speculating on the abilities and status of the boy standing beside her, she then comments that he is funny, and she declares delightfully that she likes him. Meanwhile, they have been standing in front of the adventurer's shop for a long time, and the shop owner has started to get very impatient. Meanwhile, Russell starts to think about how the sisters back at the orphanage wouldn't like the fact that he has such a beautiful woman like Sibylla hanging around with him. He reflects back to the time when he used to be in the orphanage with his friends, and how back then, people in the village didn't seem to like him much. He concluded that it was because of his black hair, and the rationale that informed his thought was because the goddess is the dirty of light and brightness. And as a result, people usually looked at people with black hair like they were a bad omen. As he thinks about this, Sibylla informs him that they will decide the details later, but for now, they would have to form a party first. First of all, he asks her if she is sure she wants to team up with him, and explains that he doesn't understand why she wants to when they don't even know anything about each other yet. However, Sibylla brushes his concerns aside and informs him that she already has a name for the group he and she are forming. With a proud demeanor, she announces that she likes the name Oath of Dusk, and then explains that she thinks that darkness and blackness are a great thing. On hearing this, Russell is confused, and he wonders out loud why she, who believes in the goddess, would want to wear black, which is considered to be a bad omen. To this, Sibylla simply responds that she thinks he and she are a lot alike. Though he is surprised at her choice, he agrees to follow the name. She then suggests that they go to another shop to get the equipment, and when Russell suggests that they go to the weapons shop, she asks him why he wants to go there so quickly. At this, he informs her that he intends to buy a sword, and explains to her that the events of the night before proved that a saint could actually fight if they wanted to. He has been thinking about it for a long time, about the fact that he has bountiful experience with swords, and that despite the fact that he hasn't had a sword since he became a saint, his skills didn't seem to have waned at all. He then declares that from now on, he will fight as a swordsman using recovery magic. Soon after, Sibylla compliments him on his choice of swords and tells him that he looks awesome when he defeats the monster. However, she advises him to keep the robe he presently has on, because the tunic is light, strong, and resistant to magic. Apparently, it would be better to keep it than to trade it for something cheaper, and after quietly contemplating it, Russell then agrees with her. Now that they have gotten all the things they would need for their adventure, they leave the village, and soon after, they reach the entrance of the dungeon. As they stand in front of the dungeon, ready to go in, Sibylla lightly comments that it is a great day for exploring, but Russell counters by saying that the weather won't matter when they actually enter the dungeon. However, she chides him gently by saying that that's not what she means, and that she is talking about the fact that it will be quite dreary for them to go home when it is raining. However, Russell has more pressing things on his mind. Now that he is in front of the dungeon, he seems quite satisfied that he can actually see that his mind isn't playing tricks on him. Sibylla notices this, and she checks in with the guild and is told that nobody has yet ventured into the dungeon to explore it, and therefore, there is no outside information at all on what the inside looks like. The only thing that they can tell so far is that Victoria was poisoned when she went near the place. At this, Russell unsheathes his sword from his scabbard, and he then declares that it is their turn to explore it first. As he unsheathes the sword, Sibylla again comments that she knows he would look good with the black sword. Soon after, both of them enter the dungeon, and Russell informs her that he would like to go ahead while she walks behind him. However, Sibylla counters this by saying that in parties, the safest place to be is near the healer, and therefore it would make more sense for them to remain attentive and walk side by side. Russell doesn't offer any rebuttal to this, so she takes it as an agreement, and then the duo begins to walk side by side. Not long after, the duo stumble upon a goblin with a club. Sibylla is the first to express her delight, and she comments that this is the easy part. A glowing orb of energy appears within her palm, and without hesitation, she directs a large stream of flame magic toward the goblin, who is immediately engulfed by it before it has the chance to react. However, as she does this, Russell's eyes widen in extreme shock, coming from the fact that she used that much magic without even casting a verbal spell. He mentions this to her, but she seems confused about the fact that he hasn't seen magic without invocation being used before. After she says this, Russell deliberates on the probability that he is able to use that kind of magic. But before both of them can react, the goblin immediately stands up and rushes toward Sibylla before they can react. Russell yells out her name, but it is too late. The goblin reaches her first, but before it's able to do more damage, Russell quickly disposes of it with a powerful strike from his sword. Fluid gushes from the creature's fatal wounds, and Russell immediately turns his attention back to Sibylla, asking her if she is okay. It turns out that the goblin Russell had just gone against was another one different from the one that she had initially dispatched, and because she had let her guard down, she didn't see it before it attacked her. The injury that has been inflicted on her is not a big wound, but it is enough to sap her energy, and she explains that they would not be able to explore the dungeon anymore because of it. However, Russell reminds her that he has healing abilities, and he then tells her that if she is hurt, he will heal her. At this point, she informs him that the main characteristic of the Black Goblins is that they inflict poison with their hits. The poison they inflict also isn't the normal one, but is one that is difficult to cure, and one that causes a very terrible disease. As she says this, Russell reflects on the fact that Victoria was attacked by a monster who had this same style of poison, and before Sibylla can say anything, he invokes his healing powers, and then uses the cure spell on her without voicing the incantations. He uses the cure spell in tandem with the heal spell, and within seconds, Sibylla begins to comment that she feels better. However, she is surprised that he was able to use the spells non-verbally, especially considering that he just knew about non-verbal magic. But he only comments that he just tried it, and it seemed to have worked. Moreover, Sibylla comments that her injuries seem to have disappeared, and it seems like the poison has retreated away from her body. It is at this point that Russell also tells her that he used the cure spell as well. Sibylla also seems confused that he was able to do so without reciting the words. At this point, Sibylla then asks him when he first learned cure, and he then tells her that he learned cure at level 2. This makes her extremely shocked, and she asks him again if he is sure that was when he learned it, and to this, he replies affirmatively. She then asks him when he learned heal, and he tells her that he could use heal since he was at level 1. This surprises her greatly to the extent that she seems alarmed, and she explains that this is the first time that she has heard of a job requirement where the person can use the abilities from the first level. With her hand on her chin, she begins to deliberate on the abilities of a saint, and she is surprised because she didn't know they were this powerful. However, Russell breaks into her thoughts again and then asks her to watch him. As she watches him, he verbally uses the spell Wind Barrier, and she is immediately awed by the fact that he can use the Wind Barrier despite the fact that he isn't on a high level yet. Apparently, after fighting the goblins, he has leveled up to level 6, and this is the new ability that came with the level up. Apparently, the Wind Barrier is a spell that allows the user to block arrows with a barrier, and it is also able to repel some low-level magic from enemies. So Russell rationalized that it would be of great help to him when he is fighting against some of the weaker monsters who would not be able to get through it. Additionally, party members are able to pass through the barrier without issue, so it doesn't just help the user. At this point, Sibylla then asks him if he is sure he is okay with using all this magic power, and then she advises him that exploration of the dungeon would be a time-consuming thing, and therefore it would be best for him to conserve his magic power instead of using it to showcase to her. However, Russell counters this by telling her that magic doesn't usually consume that much of his power, and that ever since he became powerful, he's been able to use as much magic as he wants, whenever he wants to use it. This information shocks Sibylla, and she begins to realize just how powerful Russell really is. Even he doesn't seem to know the extent to which his powers lay, because his friends had made him seem useless in the first place. Sibylla is in awe of the guy in front of her. Apparently, he is an excellent swordsman, and he has the ability to use healing magic consistently and constantly. At this, she begins to wonder what someone like him is doing alone. Meanwhile, somewhere far off, the rest of the group traverses a village after a long day of exploring a dungeon. Vince still has an arrogant smile on his face, while Emmy and Janet seem to be more subdued. Despite noticing this, Vince reiterates to them that they do not need a healer, and although this doesn't seem to raise Emmy or Janet's spirits, he assures them that together, they would be the strongest group of fighters in the world. Although Vince is still convinced that they do not need Russell, Emmy has already started to feel remorse for being a part of the process of kicking him out. She begins to reflect, recalling the sweet memories of when she was a child, and would eventually lose things that she owned. In all of this, Russell would always be the one to help her find her stuff, because she was not good at finding them herself, and he always did so with a smile on his face and without complaint. Anytime she lost something, she would always unconsciously wait for Russell to put it in her hand while she was crying, and she had always thought that he would always be there to help her, even when they grew up. Now, things had changed. Things had changed greatly, and part of it was her fault. In the present, Vince turns to her with a smile on his face, and he urges her not to worry about anything, reiterating that they do not need the healer role, and that the three of them are the strongest group of heroes in the world. Standing there in her paladin armor, she doesn't look quite so sure. Instead, she looks sad, and she begins to wonder how they ended up like this. With more reflection, she remembers when she used to think that the four of them would be together forever, considering the fact that they grew up together. Even when Vince had told her to fight Russell, she didn't initially want to fight him, and she had just held her shield in a defensive stance. According to her, she didn't even know what had happened, and the next thing, Russell was on the ground while she stood over him. She begins to think she has done something wrong and unforgivable, but as she walks, she notices that Vince has started to look at Janet's body again. She then wonders what he was thinking when he had initially sent Russell out of the group, but at that moment, a voice interrupts her thoughts and she looks up. Standing in front of the group is the most beautiful woman they have ever seen, dressed in the most bodacious adventurer's uniform that has ever been conceived. The woman asks for confirmation on if they are the famous group of heroes around here, and though Emmy and Janet glare at her passively, Vince clearly is already taken in by her. To her question, he eagerly replies, yes, while blushing, and she then rushes to him to wrap herself around his arm. As she does so, she apologizes for bothering them like this, then introduces herself to them as Katie. At this point, Vince decides to play it cool, but he does a bad job of trying to appear detached. He introduces himself as the hero, and then introduces his two friends, Emmy the Paladin and Janet the Sage. On hearing this, Katie seems impressed that all the members of the group, including the hero, are in this position, and then she pulls Vince away, suggesting that they get something to eat, to which Vince enthusiastically agrees, and then offers to pay for the meal. As Katie and Vince leave, Emmy and Janet watch in disbelief, and Emmy thinks about the fact that Vince is essentially choosing to spend the group's money on the girl. Soon after, the four of them settle in a diner, and Vince then asks Katie what she wants to ask of them. In reply to this, the girl only simpers, and then tells Vince that she only wants to know what kind of activities the heroes group is doing and how far they have come. She also confides in them that she isn't trying to gather extraneous information, and that she's only a level 10 mage. Without thinking of the wisdom of what he is doing, Vince immediately begins to tell her everything the group has been through. He explains that it has been 6 months since they first got into the Hammond dungeon, and that so far, they have already advanced to the 8th floor of the middle lair. The fact that they have cleared 8 floors in 6 months makes Katie very impressed, and she asks them if they are already able to take on monsters like the Minotaurs themselves, to which Vince replies delightfully that she is very well informed. At this point, Vince begins to explain to her how the team forms when they battle. He tells her that Emmy is able to stop a Minotaur's attacks with her shield, and this further impresses Katie. However, Emmy humbly volunteers that she is only able to do that because she is a level 23 paladin, and that this is the only reason why she can face a monster that strong. But Katie brushes off her humility and compliments her that she is really cool. However, before the group can go further, Katie stops the conversation, and before anyone can say anything, she asks them why there isn't a priest in their group. This question stuns the rest of them into silence, and while Vince only stares at her, Emmy glares at her with anger, but Janet keeps an expressionless gaze on her face and doesn't even seem to be listening to her. Breaking the ice, Vince gains back his winning smile and informs her that all of them can use recovery magic, and that because of this, someone who can only use recovery magic isn't someone that they need. To this, Katie doesn't push the matter further, but she does comment that that sounds inconvenient. Vince's thick skull cannot comprehend the implication of what she is saying, so before Katie even begins to break it down for him, he starts to yell at the top of his voice, reiterating that they are all recovery spellcasters, and that they do not need a priest. Here he almost mentions the word saint, but he catches himself. He also mentions that a healer without the means to attack is nothing but a nuisance and a waste of food and resources. His voice has become so loud that Janet whispers to him to bring it down, because the other customers are watching them. He apologizes, and then Katie asks Janet if she knows the cure spell. At first, Janet feigns confusion at what she means, but then she admits that she learned the cure spell at level 15, and that she's now at level 26. Katie continues to ask questions, and she asks Janet when she learned the fireball attack magic, to which Janet replies that she learned it at level 1. It is at this point that Katie begins to break down the role. She explains that the Sage is basically the same role as the Great Wizard role, and apparently the crew didn't know this information because they initially expressed confusion at it. Katie sees that they do not know what she is talking about, so she begins to explain that the Saint is the ultimate priest, who specializes in recovery magic, and that this role is usually paired with the ultimate mage, the Great Wizard, which is akin to the Sage, who is good at offensive magic. Apparently, the Sage is able to use both recovery and attack magic, and she further explained that both roles, the Saint and the Sage, are supposed to complement each other. According to her, though, she explains that since people aren't usually as balanced as they are expected to be, the owners of these magic roles tend to favor one part of their magic over the others. And she confides in the group that, in Janet's case, she seems to lean towards the Great Wizard role because she learns offensive magic faster. As a result of this, her recovery magic is naturally below that of a priest. Despite this, she still had the powers and skills of the great wizard, and as the extremely skilled person that she is, she could use recovery magic as well. On hearing this, Emmy begins to wonder if Janet's recovery magic truly is below the capabilities of a priest, talk less of a saint. The implications of this means that she cannot serve as a substitute for a priest in the group. Before she can fully think about the implications, Janet faces Katie again and asks her when priests usually learn the cure skill. To this, Katie closes her eyes sagely and then replies that priests usually learn the cure spell at level 10. Meanwhile, far away from the group, Russell is facing off against monsters in the dungeon on his own, a man who learned his own cure spell at just level 2. From level 6, he is now finally at level 8, and he dispatches demons and monsters with a fervor that only a swordsman of his skill level can replicate. As he announces that he is now on level 8, Sibylla congratulates him and tells him that he is doing great. As they get into stance, back to back so that no monsters catch them unawares, Sibylla informs him that the monsters they are currently fighting have lots of experience points, and as a result, defeating them would allow him to raise his level as quickly as possible. Russell never thought that he would be able to level up this easily by defeating monsters directly, but he informs Sibylla that he has finally learned some new magic. The name of the new spell that he has just learned is Cure Link. On seeing his new spell, he has a disinterested look on his face, and he thinks about the fact that the cure he learned at level 2 is a spell that affects everyone in his group. He then comments to Sibylla that the spell is a bit basic, but she snaps at him, angry that he is downgrading the strength of his spells. According to her, she didn't even know that Cure Link magic existed, and she informs him that this type of magic is basically a pure cure and is something that can change the tide of battle. This confuses Russell, and he asks her what a pure cure is. Sibylla replies by telling him that a pure cure is a complete cure, and that normal healing magic can remove paralysis, sleep, and even poisoning. But that full cure is learned at approximately level 10 for most priests, but that normal priests aren't able to reach level 10 so easily because they cannot defeat monsters. In his own case, though, he has learned cure since level 2, and now he is able to learn more magic because he actually has the skill to defeat monsters on his own. This is coupled with the fact that he seems to be learning magic spells earlier than regular priests do. Apparently, the Cure Link is an extra kind of spell, and Russell mentions that he actually learned it at level 7, but didn't say anything. Ignoring his close-mouthedness, Sibylla seems very gleeful, and she asks him why he didn't mention it before, then informs him that this extra cure spell is ridiculously strong magic. Russell continues to be unimpressed by this, and he points out that he doesn't need any more extra cure spells. However, Sibylla asks him what he thinks is the ultimate recovery magic, and then she explains to him that the spells he is learning are capable of bringing all teammates back to full health all at the same time, even when they are on the verge of death. On hearing this, he sarcastically comments that she seems to know a lot about the healer's magic, and he then asks her if there is anything else that she would like to tell him. To this, she sighs heavily, and then tells him that he seems to have learned everything about healing magic. Going on, she tells him that he has already learned the best recovery magic in his class, and that he is already one of the best in the world, maybe ever. However, Russell doesn't seem satisfied, and he then asks her if there is any sort of enhancement magic that he can use to help him with attacking. But she replies the enhancement magic is only for roles like that of mages like her, or magic swordsmen. Furthermore, she informs him that there is no sort of attack magic for recovery roles, and that, ordinarily, a class specializing in recovery doesn't have time to start learning attack magic. On hearing this, Russell begins to reflect on the fact that this means that even if he is in the heroes group, he still wouldn't be able to participate in the offensive effort. And as a result of this, he starts to question his worth and believe that, as a saint, he is essentially useless in the end. As he thinks about this, he receives a hard slap, and when he turns to glare at Sibylla, she relates to him that she knows what he is thinking, and that she thinks he should be a little more satisfied with his skills, since they are very rare. She reiterates that the Link spell works with all allies he recognizes, and that it can be used anywhere, even in extreme emergency cases, like when a city castle is attacked by a deadly disease. Going on, she reminds him that with this ability, he can essentially heal a country, and can even heal them in a single stroke if he wants to do so. Also, she then asks him if he has heard about the legend of the saint. To this, he retains a confused look on his face, and Sibylla takes this as an incentive to begin the story. In the Book of the Goddess, the saint's prayers were integral to the destruction of the demon-infested miasma that was enveloping the entire country. Apparently, the saint's prayers were heard by the goddess, and immediately all the villagers who were afflicted were cured on the same day. After this was done, the saint fell asleep for days. Although this was what happened in the Book of the Goddess, Sibylla mentions that this is most likely just a retelling, and that what likely happened is that the saintess secretly used Cure Link on the entire village, and then fell asleep because her magic was exhausted. After her story, she tells Russell that he is presently as powerful as a legend, and then she asks him why he is still complaining about his lack of magic despite this. Initially, Russell keeps an odd look on his face, and the fact of what she has said finally dawns on him. He really is presently as powerful as a legend, and soon he comments that he isn't as bad as to complain about everything that he has. Suddenly, he breaks into a gentle smile, and then thanks Sibylla for everything she has done for him. On the other hand, Sibylla didn't expect a compliment, so she begins to blush, and then, to ensure that the moment doesn't get too tender, she snaps at him, asking him if he is this way with everyone, and also starts to demand to know if he has fallen in love with her. Russell only looks at her with a bored look on his face, but she continues to tease him, and then begins to mimic him confessing his love to her. She urges him to speak his mind and confess his love to her, but he smacks her on the head and then walks away while she nurses the swelling. He then calls back to tell her that break time is over, and that they should continue to get rid of the monsters so they can move on. After coming down a stairway, they get to the second level, and Russell comments that there are too many monsters for the first level only. The second level seems to be the purple floor, but suddenly, Sibylla mutters something in alarm. When Russell questions her, she tells him that the dungeons are usually divided into upper, middle, and lower floors. Apparently, the upper level is a normal rocky surface. The middle level is a floor that runs blue, and then further in the end, the lower layer is one that usually turns red. They were at the purple level, which meant, as Sibylla had guessed, that they were at the lowest level of the dungeon, the level of the dungeons, also known as Underworld, which was usually where they lived and were summoned from. Here, Sibylla informs him that the second level usually would be the hardest he would face, but then he asks her what kind of dungeon this is. Before they walk deeper into the dungeon, they are met with a very dark aura that surrounds them. After a while, the aura coalesces into a dark mass, and before it fully forms, it talks. With a raspy, evil voice, it informs them that Sibylla is wrong with her projection, and that in this dungeon, there are only 2 levels, which it created personally. As the dark mass begins to form into a more solid shape, it seems to be a large but slim humanoid figure, in a jester's robe, holding a torch to light the very dark room. It welcomes the humans into the lowest part of the dungeon, and then it informs them that it is the Dungeon Maker, the personality who created Adria's dungeon himself. At this, Russell keeps a level, calm look on his face, and he asks what the Dungeon Maker is. Sibylla, on the other hand, mutters that the lowest level of the dungeons is also known as the Underworld, and it is usually where the Dungeon Maker is located. Going on, she reveals to him that the Dungeon Maker is also known as the Demon King, and at that point, the dark mass has fully formed into a pale-looking man with one eye normal, the other looking like a miniature sun, dazzling in his socket. His teeth are jagged, and his face is thin, giving his smile a certain level of deviousness that isn't usually achieved easily by mere mortals. This man is, of course, the Demon King. On hearing this, Russell's composure only slips a little to let a bit of shock show on his face, but his eyes steel in readiness for the battle that is to come. Without taking his eyes off the Demon King, he asks Sibylla if this is the same entity that was usually featured in the legends, and she replies that it is, and that this is the same Demon King that the legendary hero and saint has to defeat together, the enemy of mankind and the king of the demons and monsters, who is known to have overwhelming strength. For a while, the Demon King keeps silent while they talk, but on hearing this, he chuckles and commends them for having the appropriate reaction to meeting the most evil being in existence. He also subtly brags that they should consider themselves lucky, considering that there are so few humans who have the honor of meeting him. However, Russell doesn't feel honored. With anger on his face, he asks the Demon King what he is doing here, and why he would build a dungeon so close to a village in the middle of nowhere that is of no importance. In his raspy voice, the Demon King only chuckles and teases, saying that the village is nice but letting them in on his plans. Apparently, in the orphanage of the village, there is a paladin who is in charge of protecting the hero, and immediately, Russell makes the connection that the Demon King is talking about Emmy. However, he is smart enough not to draw attention to the fact that he knows the person, and he only responds with outrage that the Demon King is targeting the hero's group. With a smile on his dark face, the Demon King replies that he guessed right, and as the dark shadows coalesce around his infernal form, the Demon King declares that the hero must be eliminated from this world. Meanwhile, both Sibylla and Russell have already assumed their battle stances, with Russell having a hand on his sword, ready to draw it out at the slightest provocation. However, Sibylla seems smart enough to keep the Demon King talking so as to know all his plans, so she asks him why he is targeting the paladin, and that if he wants to get to the hero, the quickest way to do so is to go directly against him from the beginning. To this, however, the Demon King replies that the most important part of a strategy like this is patience. Before he keeps talking, he chuckles and comments that this is his first time talking this much, and he then remarks that it is fun. Going on, he divulges that when targeting a group of heroes, the first person to go for is the healer. Because of their amazing powers of recovery and healing, the battle would be drawn out for too long, and would then become very complicated. However, while the Saintess, the strongest recovery magic user, is basically defenseless and without any attack capabilities, they would usually be protected by a shield bearer, which in this case is the paladin, who is the strongest shield bearer in the world. However, when Russell feigns confusion, the Demon King corrects himself by saying, "Ah, my mistake. I hear that there is no saint this time." He says this without knowing that there actually is a saint this time, and that the saint in question is right in front of him. However, he is of the opinion that since the heroes group doesn't have a saint, they would have a priest, who would be the expert in recovery magic in the group. He speculates out loud that a simple priest would be easy to assassinate, and then, with a devious smile on his face, he mentions that this is why he has to kill the paladin, who protects the priest first. After he has done that, the next step would be to kill the priest, and then he can focus on taking his time to kill the hero. Although the Demon King doesn't seem to know the true situation of things, Russell finds himself respecting the resourcefulness of the Demon King, especially at the fact that he seems to have gathered a lot of information in advance, and how he has already fabricated a plan to kill and decimate the heroes group in the simplest way possible. He stares at the Demon King, the powerful dark creature in front of him, and for the first time, he truly realizes the danger that is there in going up against such a creature at any time. However, he stops in front of Sibylla, guarding her with his body, and he points his sword at the Demon King, then demands to know what the creature intends to do with them now. As he says this, he reflects on the fact that the Demon King doesn't even know that the saintess of this generation is presently in his front as a saint. If the Demon King wants to eliminate the hero, and he finds out that the saint, which is Russell, has left the hero's team, or was even in his front presently, they would all be in danger. While he thinks of this, the Demon King addresses him and responds to his question by saying that he would be a part of something very important. As he says this, the floor begins to glow, and a summoning circle with various bright sigils appears. While they glow, the Demon King informs them that he intends for them to be the test subjects of his new creation. And before anyone can say anything more, the room is shrouded in extreme heat, and then fire begins to appear around the place. With surprise in their eyes, Russell and Sibylla watch as a fire dragon, surrounded by flames, appears out of the circle and fixes them with a predatory gaze. At this, Sibylla blurts out that she cannot believe that the Demon King summoned such a high-level monster, and as the creature squares off against them, the Demon King expresses his pleasure that the summoning is successful. He teases them by saying that it was fun talking to them humans, but it's time to say goodbye. With that, he vanishes, and Russell immediately suggests to Sibylla that they get out of there as well. However, she responds that that is currently impossible, and that before he leaves, the Demon King sets up the dragon as the floor booze, and as such, all the exits to the room are sealed. Before anything can be said again, the dragon opens its mouth wide and blows a heavy jet of fire towards the duo. By instinct, Russell is able to conjure up the wind barrier verbally, as well as non-verbally, and the barrier that came up is somehow able to hold against the dragon's breath, despite the fact that it was conjured up by a saint who was still at a low level. Sibylla compliments him on his good work, and he soon realizes that the reason that the wind barrier is so strong is because he used the incantation both verbally and non-verbally. As such, the barrier that appeared is twice as tough as the one that would have appeared if he only used one version of the incantation. However, he lets the barrier down, and when Sibylla comments on this, he informs her that it would be prudent for them to retreat for now. Here, he makes his first mistake. While he says that, he turns his head to look at her, and as such, he lets the dragon leave his sight. The creature then uses this as an advantage to attack him. Before he can react, the dragon's heavy tail smacks him across the chest, and he flies away, hits the far wall, and cracks it with his momentum. Sibylla hells his name, but he immediately stands up and uses the extra heal spell on himself non-verbally. In the meantime, he directs Sibylla to a crevice in the wall, and they begin to hide there from the dragon. As they hide, he reflects on their possible choices and thinks about the fact that there would be no way to get out of the room without defeating the floor boss. As he hides in the shadows, he is also aware that despite Sibylla being of a higher level than him, she wouldn't stand a chance of defeating the dragon either. It is at this point he begins to ask himself if this is where they die, and then continues to reflect on his choices and the pathways that had brought him here. Apparently, when he first met Sibylla, he had thought that he had finally found a new path. Things now seemed anticlimactic, considering the fact that he had only just discovered his potential, but was now going to be devoured by a dragon. While he wonders how it is all going to end, he again is brought to reality by Sibylla's voice. She is apparently asking him again if he believes in the goddess. He turns around to look at her, probably to ask her to snap out of asking such a ridiculous question like that in the face of real danger. But as he turns around, he sees that she is not smiling as jovially as she usually does. Misinterpreting this as her being scared, he chuckles to ease the tension, and then asks her why she is asking him that question again. Going on, he begins to snap that the goddess forced him into a profession where he couldn't even defend himself in situations and crises like this one, and then he shouts that he doesn't believe in the goddess at all. In response to this, Sibylla looks strangely but sadly disappointed, but suddenly she asks him if he truly wants power. Russell's eyes widened. He is shocked, and for good reason, because at this point Sibylla has started to grow dark wings out of her back. She continues to ask him if he wants power, the power to destroy, the power to fight, the power to defeat the threat in front of him. She ends the question by asking him if he wants overwhelming power, but at this point, his shock at her new form doesn't even let him form coherent sentences when he speaks. He is staring at Sibylla, only this time, this is not the Sibylla he knows. This one is more magnificent. Her fair hair flows, and she has large dark wings sprouting out from her back. Before he can say anything, she informs him that she is a goddess, and though she can see that he wants to ask questions, she cuts him off and tells him that she isn't the current sun goddess who is revered by all, and that assigns people into roles, but that she is a different goddess who is known as the goddess of darkness. Going on, she informs him that since she is the antithesis of the sun goddess, who is about light, it is natural that the goddess's followers would label her as an evil goddess. More so, she informs him that she has been observing priests all over the world, and that amongst all the healers she has met, she has been looking for someone who has immense power due to resentment. So far, of all the priests she had come across, the one she was most interested in was him, Russell, who had been unjustly scorned by the real goddess. She then asks him if he wants real power, and then she starts to lay out all the injustices he has faced since the goddess had made him the saint. He had been betrayed by people he thought were his friends, and as such, she was now giving him the overwhelming power to turn his back on the hero. She continues to talk while he watches her in awe. She confides in him that she has manifested herself in this world many times using many forms, and that she was occasionally responsible for turning priests into dark wizards. Her arm is outstretched to him in a quiet encouragement for him to take it, and she then asks him if he is interested in taking an oath of darkness with her. Apparently, in exchange for his accumulated magical skills, she was willing to grant him great power, the ultimate offensive magic, also known as dark magic. Although he keeps staring at her in awe, he recollects himself enough to ask her what dark magic entails, and then he asks her to explain the price she is asking of him. She then explains to him that the price she is asking of him is to give her all the recovery magic that she has learned, and this alerts him immediately. He begins to think of the times when he used to think he would naturally be chosen for attack magic, and then how he felt when Janet was the first to learn recovery magic alongside him. Not long after Janet had learned the magic, Emmy, too, had learned recovery magic as a paladin with exceptional defense and attack. The death knell of his time in the group was sealed when Vince, the hero who specialized in offensive magic like sword magic and attack magic, was able to learn recovery magic also. With these thoughts flying through his mind, he begins to lift his arm and take Sibylla's outstretched arm to seal the deal. After all, this was the point of him going out on his own. This was the reason he was so angry at the sun goddess that he had started hating her. No longer would he be confined to the role of the recovery bum who couldn't even attack or defend himself. Now, he would be able to gain exceptional power, the power that even Vince himself couldn't yet dream of. But as his hand reaches the threshold of Sibylla's palm, he remembers Brenda's tiny smile, and his eyes widen at the thought of what he is about to give up. Suddenly, he balls his outstretched palm into a fist and withdraws it from the cusp of Sibylla's outstretched palm. While he does this, he offers her an apology, and then defeatedly tells her that he doesn't think he can accept that proposal. This greatly confuses Sibylla, and when she makes a noise of inquiry, he responds with a nostalgic smile that if he loses his healing magic, there will be a little girl who will cry when she finds out. Furthermore, he ends by saying that this is the reason why he cannot accept her proposal. Although Sibylla is disappointed, she stutters, but then admits to him that she understands his reason, and that she knows that is how he is. He would forever be the kind of person who chooses to help people above his own interests, and with a dark look across her face, she comments on the irony that despite having the sun goddess for making him a saint, he has now chosen to keep the powers so that he can easily help other people. She looks a little bit forlorn, and she then comments that he actually embodies the role of the saint more than he'd cared to admit. However, before she can withdraw her arm, Russell quickly grasps her palm with his and proposes another deal to her. He asks her if she can teach him some dark magic. She is confused at this and tries to extricate her palm from his, but he doesn't budge. She then asks him if he heard what she said, but he explains that he understands everything that she said, and that she claimed that to learn dark magic, he has to pay with known skills. She reluctantly corroborates this assertion, and then he points out that he has already learned the last bit of magic that he can learn, which is Cure Link at level 7. After that, he easily annihilated all the monsters in the first level before coming down to the second level, and currently, he is a level 12 saint. Going on, he explains to her that since he reached level 9, he has felt a large increase in magic power, but the catch seems to be that the power is only storing, and that he isn't able to learn any other spells despite the increase in levels. On hearing this, Sibylla seems to be shocked, and she reiterates that he doesn't get any new magic, and that he would only have a vast amount of magic power that keeps increasing as he levels up. At this, he maintains a determined look, and then he asks her if she would be willing to teach him some dark magic if he barters some of his magic power without losing his learned spells or his role as a saint. Going on, he mentions that she was the one who saved him and showed him how useful his powers could be, and that even though he doesn't believe in the sun goddess, he believes in her, Sibylla, the goddess of darkness. His eyes well up at his speech, and he again asks her to reconsider the oath of darkness she is offering to him. His determination impresses her, and she smiles at him, then suddenly starts to recite the declaration that would give him the ability to use dark magic. She declares the preservation of his status as a saint, but also declares that from now on, he would also be a great dark wizard. She then converts his magic powers, and seconds later, it is over. He now finally has the ability to use dark magic alongside his healing powers. He gets to work immediately. Calling on the deep well of new power surging within him, he uses the dark arrow spell, and this powerful spell fizzes across the air and knocks down the dragon without much difficulty. The dragon roars in pain but immediately gets up, and then Russell readies another blast of magic. Before he lets go, he thinks about Vince, about the fact that after years of hard work, he was always the secondary character to him. Now, though, he had power of his own, and he is now convinced that he has finally caught up to his former friend. As he crosses his sword, he uses the Enchant Dark spell, both verbally and non-verbally, for the double effect, and suddenly, his sword lights up with black lightning, crackling with forbidden energy, and threatening the dragon with the promise of pain and defeat. The dragon squares up to him, roaring and billowing flames in anger, but the new great dark wizard enters into his attack stance. This is going to be a very serious fight. The dragon then roars at him again, and Russell readies his sword, prepared for whatever the dragon throws at him. The sword is still crackling with dark energy, and Sibylla, the dark goddess, stands by the sidelines watching the scene with curiosity. The dragon charges, and immediately, Russell summons the dark javelin spell again. A circle of dark sigils appears in front of him, and from them, a stream of dark energy bursts through. The energy hits the dragon indirectly, and the dragon recoils wounded and almost defeated. Although the dragon has strong scales that protect it from any harm, those scales do not seem strong enough to withstand the onslaught of Russell's attacks. Within seconds, the dragon is defeated, and Russell walks over to it, confident that he has put down one of the strongest magical creatures that exist. Despite the fact that he didn't quite manage a direct hit, it seems like his new powers still were able to take the dragon down, and he smiles, proud at the fact that he now has attack magic that he can use. However, the dragon suddenly wakes up and fires a blast of white hot at the great wizard from its mouth. Alarmed, Sibylla screams his name, but when the dust clears, another dark arrow spell shoots up from the ground, and Russell appears before the dragon, unscathed and unharmed. Apparently, before the dragon's attack had hit him, he had instinctively used the wind barrier to withstand the blow. He had activated it without reciting again, stunning Sibylla and impressing her that he seemed to be able to use both the powers of the saint and the great wizard at the same time. Worried, she yells at him and demands that he should not dare to die, and he responds to this by hefting his sword, and then saying that he would not die after coming this far. Suddenly, the dragon comes for another attack, this time a frontal one. It tries to slam him off his feet, but Russell blocks the blow with his wind barrier, and it breaks because it is not a double barrier like the one he conjured up before. The dragon hits him away, and he is pushed back, flying. As he is flung through the air, he thinks about the fact that he has had a long journey, and he promises himself that this journey is not going to end here. He has a bleeding lip, but with a confident smile, he immediately uses the extra heal spell, and then lands on his feet as agile as a cat. Facing the dragon, he taunts it, calling it a big red lizard, and telling it that without the instant death spell, there is nothing it can do to defeat him completely. They charge at each other again, the dragon out for blood. Russell is determined not to be defeated when he is only just starting his story. With one large, powerful swipe, he slices the neck of the creature, and just like that, ichor gushes out of the creature's severed neck, dripping all over him. Now that he has defeated the creature, Sibylla runs to him, shouting excitedly at him and healing him with praise, calling him a dragon slayer. With tears of pride in her eyes, she thanks him, but with the blood of the dragon still all over him, he responds that he should be the one thanking her. He takes one full glance at her, and then asks her if her wings have gotten bigger, to which she replies affirmatively. According to her, they had not only just gotten bigger, but also darker, since she took the oath of darkness with him. As a result of this oath, her status as a goddess has risen again, and on hearing this, Russell congratulates her. She then informs him that he is covered in dragon blood, and he replies that he would have loved to have magic that could cleanse him, but that he didn't learn any as a saint. At this, Sibylla then tells him that the cure skill also has a cleansing effect, and although this shocks him, she reiterates that the saint's healing abilities also serve to heal and chase away fatigue. On hearing this, he immediately performs the cure spell, and although the dragon blood cleanses off him, his robes no longer retain the white color that they used to be. Instead, they have turned a very dark black color. This comes as a surprise, and he immediately asks her why his clothes are a different color, even though the spell cleansed his body of the dragon blood. Initially, Sibylla only mutters the word, black kite, and when she notices his confusion at her words, she informs him that there is a bed known as the black kite. He is still confused, and he asks her what she is talking about. She then begins to explain to him that if the cure spell didn't have a cleansing effect on his robes, then that means that it didn't perceive the dragon blood as dirt. For example, she explains that salamander blood is heat-resistant and is always used for dyeing. Magical creatures usually have magical properties in their blood, so the blood of a dragon must have a powerful magical effect that is now spread across his robes. She then comments that although his tunic was already very impressive and powerful, it would now become even more so now that it has the blood of the dragon spread across it. However, Russell then comments that he doesn't see what this has to do with the black kite like she said. At this, she begins to explain to him the significance of the creatures. She starts by mentioning how, once upon a time, in a country that once loved the bird, the black kite was considered to be an omen of victory. There was a saying that went, "The white cloth is stained with blood, and the bright gold thread replaces the blood." Furthermore, the first thing that the locals would think about when they first saw him is the black kite. Apparently, this is supposed to be his new name. Russell then approaches the dragon and charges his sword again with the Enchant Dark spell. With one swipe, he slices the dragon's chest open, and as he does this, he tells Sibylla that one of the rewards of slaying a dragon is dragon meat, and as he searches through the dragon's body, he finally reaches its heart. On seeing this, Sibylla advises him by telling him that it usually would be cooked a little before eating, but then again, there is the problem that fire dragons don't burn or freeze in the first place. With that in mind, they decide to eat it raw. At first, Russell voices his reservations about doing such a thing, but Sibylla informs him that the heart of a dragon deteriorates quickly, and that it cannot be frozen. She reiterates that it is a rare delicacy that they would only be allowed to eat after they have slain the dragon. However, she admits to him that she hasn't eaten one before either, and then, the two of them decide to finally eat it raw. Though they approach it with apprehension, they soon find out that it tastes normal, not like the sweetness of a fruit, but like the creaminess of a buttery baked good. After eating it, Russell goes up another level, and Sibylla explains that it is nothing surprising, considering that they have bested a dragon in combat. Also, those who eat the heart, which is a massive life force and magic, also become much stronger without doing anything. Initially, he had reverted to level 4 after changing his profession to become Great Dark Wizard. He was now at level 7 of the role. On seeing this, He is awed by the fact that he has gotten so much more power just by eating half of the heart, and it is at this point that it occurs to him that he ate just half of the heart. Annoyed, he turns to Sibylla and expresses light indignation, telling her that he was the one who defeated the dragon in the first place. In response, she smiles gleefully and informs him that she is now a level 21 mage, and to this, Russell wonders how she achieved such a jump, considering that she was a level 8 mage when they entered the dungeon. Giving up, he sighs, and then mentions that if it wasn't for her, he wouldn't have been able to kill the dragon in the first place, so a 50-50 split of the bounty is fair. They turn back to the corpse of the dragon, and then Sibylla informs him that dragon scales are a famous rare material for strong armor, but that the number of scales they have now would be more than enough for the both of them. Sibylla comes up with a solution for this by suggesting that the villagers of Adria would be able to use it. Later that night, Russell settled for a meal of dragon meat on a stick and a beverage. After leaving the dungeon, they had taken a sample of the fire dragon scale to the Adventurers Guild, and the villagers had made a fuss. Immediately, Sibylla petitioned the guild with a unique reward for helping to transport the dragon, and soon after, the villagers went down in bulk to help haul the parts of the dragon up. On the other hand, the guild offered to buy the claws, fangs, and other materials from the dragon, but they admitted that a village this small wouldn't be able to process the meat. Sibylla, too, had envisioned that the meat would spoil before they took it to the nearest city, so instead of eating it all, she and Russell had decided to share it with the whole village, free of charge. Soon after, while Russell was sitting on his own, Grandma Gemma approached him with her own dragon meal, and Russell expressed surprise that she actually showed up. To this, the woman explains that eating dragon meat is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, and that she does not want the children of the orphanage to miss out on the opportunity. However, she congratulates him on his feat of being able to slay a dragon, and with a look of pride on her face, she admits that she was initially worried about him when he first came back to the orphanage. Apparently, she had thought he was going to perish, and before he could speak to appreciate her words, a white-haired man approached them and requested an audience. Russell rightly identifies the man as the guild's receptionist, and before more can be said, the man bows down and apologizes to Russell, much to his shock. When he asks what the apology is for, the receptionist admits that it is on behalf of him and everyone else in the town. Apparently, they had thought that he had the same attitude as Vince, because he used to stand behind Vince while the jerk assaulted other people. They initially thought that it was because he was weak and was taking advantage of the strong one, but now, on seeing how he had selflessly gone into the dungeon to slay a dragon for the entire village, they were sure that he didn't have the same character as Vince did. On hearing this, Russell is shocked that he wasn't the only one who had had to deal with Vince, and he remembers that his former friend actually had a temper and seemed to want to fight everyone he met. Going on, he asks the receptionist what the man thinks about black hair, and the man tells him that there are no negative stereotypes about black hair for him. At this point, Grandma Gemma chimes in and mentions that she didn't think he would make such a big deal out of his hair, and she sadly comments that he doesn't seem to have changed the part of himself where he tended to look down on himself. Meanwhile, she points out to him that the village is lively, which is a rare thing, and that the reason the village is lively is because of him. This touches him, but he doesn't have time to reflect on it before Sibylla comes out of nowhere, acting goofy. She asks him if he is having fun, but he knows she is presently tipsy, so he tells her not to drink too much. However, she tells him that there is someone here to see him, and she turns around to reveal Brenda and her mother, Victoria. The little girl thanks him, and then also tells him that she had no idea that he was a saint, and Victoria also informs him that, thanks to him, she was well enough to help carry the parts of the dragon from the dungeons. The girl then says that her mother is awesome and that she took the trip 3 times, but she then notices that Russell's clothes have changed, and she asks why he changed them. At this point, Sibylla chimes in, and then tells her that the clothes are the same color as the black kite, as if implanting the idea for the new name into her head. On hearing this, Brenda's eyes widen in surprise, and she exclaims that the name is awesome. Just like that, the name sticks to Russell, and he is now known as the Black Kite. On hearing this, Sibylla comments mildly that the little girl has great taste in names. Meanwhile, Roussel feels happy, and he begins to recall the past. Back then, he distanced himself from everyone because he thought they didn't like him for his black hair. If he hadn't met Brenda that day, he wouldn't have thought recovery magic to be useful, and thanks to Sibylla, he can now use both powers as a saint and a great wizard. He concludes that he is no longer a hindrance to a party, and he resolves that from now on, he will stop being so pessimistic about life. On the other hand, Brenda and Sibylla can notice the smile spreading across his lips, and they look at him surprised because they haven't seen him smile that wide before. With a smile, he remarks that he likes the Black Kite name, Meanwhile, in the Hammond dungeon, Vince, Katie, Emmy, and Janet are having trouble battling with the Minotaur. The creature knocks Emmy down, and while her friends shout in alarm, she decides to recover and regroup quickly with the others. Although she uses her recovery magic, she finds that it is not enough, and suddenly a voice asks her what she's doing, and she looks up to see Vince. He uses his own heal spell on her, and then he tells her to heal faster, or things will get dangerous for them. To this, she responds that she already has done the spell on herself, but he yells at her that she couldn't have done it. Meanwhile, the Minotaur breaks through Katie and Janet's ranks and heads for them, even though they are regrouping. On seeing this, Vince waits until the creature is close, and then he plunges his sword deep into the creature's head. It collapses, and suddenly the battle is over. Immediately, Janet asks Emmy if she is okay, but Emmy turns to Katie and addresses her only. Apparently, Katie has asked to see the teamwork of the heroes group, and because of this, Emmy apologizes for only showing her clumsiness instead. In response to this, Katie kindly tells her that that's not true, and Emmy responds that she tried to use her recovery magic, but it seems like she failed. To this, Katie tells her that the magic worked correctly, and on seeing Emmy's shock, she further explains that now that Emmy is on a high level, a simple heal spell would no longer heal her fully like it used to. Seemingly, she then starts to talk to herself. She mentions that this is why she had asked if there was a priest in the heroes group, and she begins to suggest and talk strangely about their situation. She initially suggests dispensing with the white mage and relying solely on the recovery magic of a paladin, then laughs it off and wonders if this group would be able to defeat the Demon King without recovery magic. She then pivots and wonders if she could remove the priest and solely rely on the hero's recovery spells. Again, she mentions including a martial artist as the vanguard and removing the hero and the grand mage or sage. She also wonders if she should include a holy sword and remove the priest, but then she concludes that this would not be possible for the defeat of Demon King. While she seems lost in speculation, the only person who seems to notice the weirdness is Emmy. With wide eyes, she stares at the beautiful woman and wonders what she is talking about. It seems like there is more to this woman than meets the eye.
His old memories flashed before his eyes. He remembered a time when all his teammates were getting stronger every day, but Russell was stuck. He couldn't join fights because of his saint status, so he couldn't gain experience. He knew he needed to defeat enemies to level up, but he felt stuck, useless, and unable to do anything. All he had was his healing wand, which wasn't helpful in fighting monsters. He knew if he didn't act now, he might never get another chance, but he felt trapped and couldn't join the fight, even though he wanted to. Suddenly, Sibylla's voice calling his name snapped him out of his thoughts. She asked him if he felt tired from yesterday's fight. She warned him not to lose focus because dungeons can be dangerous. Russell said he just remembered his old team for a moment. Sensing his emotional state, Sibylla offered him a comforting shoulder and asked if he was sure he wanted to do this now. The Demon King's goal in Adrian's dungeon was to invade the village and eliminate the Shield Paladin from the heroes group. Completing the conquest of the dungeon would help the heroes group that had kicked him out. With a calm expression, she mentioned she had seen everything unfold and wasn't surprised he held a grudge against those people. Once again, she asked him if he was truly willing to risk his life for that group. With a determined voice, he assured her that he was ready to do so without worrying about who they were. He wanted to do it for the villagers who had been living in fear due to the dungeon, so he wasn't doing this just for the sake of the hero group. He was no longer a saint who was not allowed to fight and only play a support role. This was the reason he desired the powers of the goddess of darkness, Sibylla. Sibylla mentioned that all the people she transformed into great dark wizards harbored some form of hatred, grudge, or resentment. The role of a priest, which should be highly respected, often faces unjust treatment just because they cannot fight. They are disappointed by those who abandoned them. To become a great dark wizard, one must relinquish the sacred power possessed by the priest. Even though she offered him this opportunity out of desperation, she still wasn't sure if it was the right decision. However, without that power, the heroes of each generation would struggle to handle the increasing number of dungeons worldwide. That's why she didn't regret her actions. As she looked into his eyes, she remarked that some people have eyes like his, eyes that look forward to doing what is right. They possess eyes of righteousness, which no one who has wielded the power of darkness has been able to erase. She smiled and remarked that this group is going to be refreshing and exciting. Suddenly changing her tone, she mentioned the Demon King they had to defeat. Surprised, Russell asked her to stop her imitation, but she laughed carelessly, enjoying her freedom. With arms outstretched, she expressed her delight, declaring the end of forcing women to conform to refined standards, and stating she would be a symbol of women's freedom. Russell couldn't help but notice her carefree nature as she laughed. As they entered the Adrian dungeon, Sabila suggested starting on the first level. Russell cast a wind barrier around them for protection, impressing Sabila with its power. She remembered how he had used it to block the dragon's breath before, and marveled at his ability to cast without reciting. She wondered if magic had always been this potent without reciting, and realized few people knew about this aspect of magic. If the legendary saint, who mastered casting magic without reciting, considered it a miraculous technique, it's possible she knew about double recitation. A normal human like Kathleen or another magic-knowledgeable woman might have taught Russell spells activated by the voice in his throat, applied to the voice in his head, which requires intense focus to succeed. Even accidentally, it's natural for the magic to be activated out loud. Sabila cast the spear of fire at the goblin, tearing it into 2 pieces. However, it exhausted her, and she couldn't perform double recitation. Running out of magic during exploration spells death for a mage. It's why double recitation isn't typically done unless the mage has inexhaustible magic power like Russell's. She decided to stay back during today's exploration, even in a sequence of boss battles. Russell remained determined to defeat the Demon King and bring peace to Adrian. Despite the risk, his determination was unwavering, even in the same place where it was killed last time. As they reached the dungeon, they were shocked by its condition. The dungeon's floor had changed from purple to red, much to Sabila's frustration. She explained that the Demon King, the dungeon's creator, had initiated a dungeon change. Russell asked her about its significance. She clarified that the dungeon's floor color changes across its upper, middle, and lower levels. Yesterday, the second level, middle level, was entirely reconstructed from the bottom layer, indicating that the Demon King had descended further down along with the lower level. Russell questioned why such changes were necessary, suggesting that summoning strong monsters from nearby surfaces could accomplish the goal of attacking the village. Sabila explained that it's more complicated than that. Dungeons serve as the dwellings of demon kings and as connections between the demon and human worlds. The lowest dungeon level, known as Hell, resembles the demon world's surface and acts as a foothold for demon kings to invade the human realm. These dungeons manifest in various places, facilitating demon world access to Earth. However, traversing between realms is challenging for demons, except for bats and specific demon types. When lower dungeon levels reach capacity, demons can push others to higher levels, but exiting the dungeon entirely is generally difficult for them. Russell grasped that the goddess of darkness bestowed humans with the power of darkness to navigate through dungeons. Sabila confirmed his understanding, portraying herself as the merciful goddess who descended to rescue the world. Annoyed, Russell recalled her earlier claim of being the goddess of darkness, also known as the goddess of evil. Sabila inquired about his experiences in the dungeon's lower levels. Russell admitted that he had never ventured into the lower levels, not even during his time with the Heroes group. Sabila warned him to exercise caution, explaining that demons in the lower levels were significantly more potent than those in the middle levels. She regretted not bringing a level 1 shield in case of emergencies. Undeterred, Russell declared that he wouldn't flee just because the lower-level demons were stronger. Sabila once again cautioned Russell to be careful of the monsters, as they are much stronger than the ones they will encounter on the middle level. A demon that looked like it was wearing steel armor sprung at him, but in the nick of time, Russell utilized his dark spear and attacked the demon. To his dismay, the attack didn't have any effect on the demon. He was shocked that a spell that can hurt a dragon didn't affect this demon at all. Sabila told him to keep going as it did have an effect. Russell decided to use what he had learned when he leveled up, thanks to the dragon heart. Changing his strategy a bit this time, he used the dark sphere, enveloping the demon in it. After a few seconds, when the magic sphere disappeared, the armored monster fell to the ground motionless. Russell wondered if he had managed to defeat it. As Russell turned to leave, the monster's hand suddenly moved, ready to strike him. Thankfully, Sabila quickly stepped in, using her fiery spear to chop the monster into small pieces, ensuring it couldn't come back as an undead. Sabila praised Russell for his bravery, but reminded him to stay alert at all times. She mentioned they were fortunate this time because the monster was slow. Russell thanked her for saving him, and then asked why she hadn't let him level up to become a great dark wizard, considering that was her goal. Sabila, feeling embarrassed, admitted she had forgotten about it entirely. Changing the topic, She inquired when Russell had learned the Dark Sphere spell. He explained he had learned it when he consumed the Dragon Heart and reached level 7. She mentioned that the Dark Sphere spell is great for attacking many enemies at once, which could help Russell level up faster if he targets large groups. Russell was surprised and asked if that was really true, considering the spell didn't seem to harm the armored monster much. She clarified that the monster was called Living Armor. Although she landed the final blow, Russell's attack had indeed dealt significant damage. Living armor is tough and resistant to both weapons and magic attacks. However, dark magic, like the Dark Sphere spell, ignores magic defense. Russell remarked that ignoring magic defense sounded like a useful technique. Excitedly, she explained that dark magic spells can defeat any monster. But despite its strength, dark magic has downsides too, the main one being that it consumes a lot of magical power. Russell noticed that he didn't feel drained of magic power, even though he had apparently used a lot. He suggested they should keep going on their journey, and Sibylla agreed. He thought that slow monsters with resistance to regular attacks were perfect targets for dark magic. If most enemies on this level were of the living armor type, it would be easy. He kept using his Dark Sphere spell to defeat various monsters successfully. Sibylla mentioned they had walked enough, and she was getting a sense of the floor's layout. She guessed the entrance to the floor boss might be further ahead. Russell, feeling a bit flustered that Sibylla didn't have a map, reminded her that he had left the mapping to her. Still, he was surprised she navigated the dungeon so well without any notes. Sibylla, blushing a little, jokingly asked why he was suddenly praising her, and teased if he had fallen in love with her again. Flustered, Russell quickly denied ever being in love with Sibylla. Amidst their friendly banter, they suddenly heard a noise and both became alert. A living armor riding on a horse was charging towards them at high speed. To shield themselves, Russell swiftly used his Dark Sphere spell, while Sibylla created a stone wall between them and the approaching monster. However, the wall proved ineffective as the horse rider effortlessly broke through it. Sibylla quickly advised Russell to block the retreat. Russell cast Dark Sphere once again. He asked why she alternated the recitation. She explained that she was trying to change the timing between the recited and unrecited spells. When casting a series of spells, one is inevitably limited by the speed at which they can cast each one. There's a limit to how fast one can cast multiple spells simultaneously. If a spell is cast when someone recites it, the next one will be cast immediately without reciting. By staggering the use of magic with voice and mind, the next spell is activated without recitation. Russell listened attentively to Sibylla's explanation and thought he could replicate the alternating spells technique. He tested it on the enemy in front of them and successfully managed to do it. Sibylla praised him, mentioning she was just testing him, but he did it perfectly. In a joint effort to deal with the enemy, Sibylla erected a stone wall while Russell unsheathed his sword, enchanting it with darkness. Observing the defeated monster's fragile appearance, Russell remarked on its vulnerability. Sibylla explained that the fastest foes are often susceptible to unexpected obstacles. Finally, they reached a door, indicating the floor boss lay just ahead, as Sibylla had predicted earlier. Russell wondered what they should do next, confident that Sibylla had an idea of what awaited them beyond the door. However, contrary to his expectations, Sibylla informed him they were going home. Russell couldn't understand why she wanted to turn back after coming all this way, so he asked her for the reason. Smiling at him, she explained that preparation is key to success, especially at times like these. This left Russell even more puzzled as he questioned the importance of defeating the Demon King for the sake of the orphanage. The Demon Lord was targeting the orphanage where he grew up to break Emmy's spirit. Sibylla acknowledged that it would be great to take down the Demon Lord sooner rather than later, but there was uncertainty about when he might strike. It could be tomorrow, next week, or even 10 years later. She explained that if they were present when the attack happened, they could protect the orphanage. Russell asked if it was confirmed that the Demon Lord would attack the orphanage, to which Sibylla confirmed. Russell expressed concern that the orphanage would be in danger, and the chances of protecting everyone would decrease. He vowed never to let that happen, knowing that Emmy would blame herself if anyone were to die. Sibylla assured him that she understood his concerns, but emphasized that if they lost now, everyone in the orphanage would die. Russell couldn't help but ponder over that possibility. There might be damage to the village, but up until now, this dungeon has been neglected. If they were to fail and Russell were to die, Adoria would have no one else to rely on. There was no option for him to be defeated for the sake of the orphanage and the village. Finally, he understood how crucial it was for them to return prepared, and he decided to heed Sibylla's advice. Once they emerged from the dungeon, Sibylla stretched her body, happy to see the clear weather and the blue sky. Russell teased her, saying that this wasn't something the goddess of twilight should be saying, but she clarified that twilight doesn't happen in the middle of the night. It's right after sunset and before the moon rises. Russell shared that he doesn't hate the sun, and this was the first time he learned about twilight. He asked Sibylla why she didn't tell him sooner that she was moving her stuff to the orphanage. Ignoring his question completely, Sibylla was gazing in a direction, indicating she was waiting for someone's arrival. After a few more seconds, suddenly Brenda's mom appeared there with a giant bag on her back. She handed the bag to Sibylla, who looked incredibly excited, like a kid with a new toy, while Russell wondered why Brenda's mom was there. Looking at the enormous bag again, he couldn't help but ask her if she had run all the way with it. She explained that she had used a horse to reach the town, and then ran after reaching the village gate. Pretending to be unaware, Sibylla mentioned that she had only put in a request to move some luggage at the guild. Russell then turned to Victoria, asking her why she was doing the task for the guild. Victoria proudly showed him her badge, with her name and level engraved on it. She admitted she had let her guard down a while ago, but she was still very capable. Sibylla began praising Victoria, calling her a big sister and strong. Victoria looked pleased with the compliments. The only person confused was Russell. He still couldn't believe that she was a skilled level 23 swordsman. He asked her why someone as skilled as her was out here in the fields. Victoria, with an innocent look on her face, explained that she had gotten a bit tired and retired. Brushing that aside, she started searching for something in the giant bag and mentioned that when the dwarf saw the materials, he was eager to make everything. She pulled out a full suit of armor made from dragon material and showed it to them. Russell was shocked to see armor made from a fire dragon. Sibylla confirmed that it was indeed the same dragon he had taken down, and she had sent out the request for it last night by horse. Victoria urged him to wear the armor right away. Reading from the instruction paper, Sibylla explained that the armor was not only flexible, but also light and easy to move in. Russell agreed, noting that the armor was incredibly light and didn't hinder his movements at all. From the outside, it seemed very tough, appearing resistant to typical blades and fangs. His attention then turned to the sword and shield. Holding both in his hands, Russell remarked on the high quality of the sword, crafted from the fangs of the fire dragon, and noted that both items were quite large in size. However, he expressed concern that they occupied both his hands, preventing him from using dark magic. If he had to choose just one, he'd prefer the sword. Seeing his confused expression, Sibylla guessed that he might be worried about freely swinging such large items in dungeons. Indeed, Russell asked if he might accidentally hit a wall and cramped spaces. Sibylla suggested that if he enchanted the sword, he could probably slice through the walls instead. Russell mused about the possibility of combining his dark magic with these high-quality dragon materials, making everything much easier. He asked if it really only took one night to send the request and receive all these items back. Sibylla explained that crafting equipment at such a fast pace was considered easy for dwarves, and any skilled dwarf could accomplish it. Russell disagreed, believing it wasn't something just anyone could do. However, Sibylla countered, saying that people often assume that if something comes easy to them, it must be easy for everyone else too. She pointed out that Russell was guilty of the same mindset. Until now, he had thought that anyone could use cure magic, which had always bothered him. Cure magic is top tier and can heal anything, but he hadn't realized its value until Sibylla was attacked. He hadn't even bothered to find out. Despite learning cure magic early, he had assumed it was a simple spell anyone could use. Sibylla suggested that the hero he was with probably had a similar mindset, assuming everyone could learn his offensive powers as he had learned healing magic. Russell clenched his fist, feeling frustrated that he had been so focused on obtaining offensive power. Sibylla nonchalantly remarked that the hero party must be in trouble now. Russell couldn't understand why the hero party would be in trouble without him. They should be able to move around more freely now that they don't have him as a burden. However, Sibylla explained that it seemed they had gotten rid of Russell because they had all learned healing spells. The hero and paladin could even learn up to Greater Heal. When he inquired about Greater Heal, she clarified that Heal is just a low-level spell. As enemies become stronger and their attacks heavier, regular heal might not be enough to recover, so Extra Heal is considered super special. Before reaching Greater Healing, there's Extra Heal, but the Saint is special because they can skip these steps. The Sage can learn Extra Heal too, but unlike the Saint, the level requirements are incredibly high, indicating that the hero party must be struggling greatly. If any of them can use Greater Healing, They should manage the middle floors fine, but they'll struggle to clear the lower levels. Meanwhile, Janet proudly showed off her newly learned greater healing to Vince and Emmy. She explained that she had been working really hard to master this advanced healing magic, reminding Vince of a past incident in the dungeon where Emmy had to cast heal twice to fully restore them. Janet emphasized the need for a dedicated healer if they wanted to explore the dungeon consistently. She proposed a solution to prevent a repeat of what happened with Russell, declaring that she would take on the healer role from now on. Emmy tried to object, stating that she was also in charge of attack, but Janet insisted that they had plenty of attackers and that she could handle both healing and attacking simultaneously. She firmly stated that all healing should be left to her alone, and this decision was not up for debate. This assertiveness from Janet was a first for them, so they agreed to leave the healing to her from then on. Just then, Katie arrived, having just come out of a nice, relaxing, hot bath. She asked if anything had happened while she was gone, and Janet informed her that they had collectively decided she would handle all the healing, not just because she had learned greater healing. Katie was pleased to hear the news and thought about how just having healing wasn't enough anymore, so it was great that Janet had learned greater healing. Taking advantage of the moment, Vince extended an invitation to Katie, asking her to join their party. Emmy objected, saying it wasn't right to ask someone to join so suddenly, but Janet agreed, stating that Katie was knowledgeable and having a dedicated mage would balance the party well now that she was taking on the healer role. Katie eagerly accepted the offer, expressing her readiness to join them if they accepted her. She hugged Vince, saying it would be an honor to join the hero's party, causing him to blush like a little girl. On the other hand, Emmy was not in favor of this decision. She was concerned about Katie's tendency to use incomprehensible words in the dungeon, which scared her. Emmy worried that Katie's knowledge, including her connection to a mage lord, might pose risks they weren't prepared for. In terms of combat, Katie was on par with the hero's party, and if she joined them, they would be stronger than ever before. However, since Russell left, they needed a healer, and Janet decided to step up and fill the role herself. She felt saddened that everyone seemed to be forgetting about Russell so easily, their childhood friend. At night, Emmy woke up to get some water and noticed that Katie wasn't in her bed. Concerned, she left her room to check on her and found Katie standing in front of the window, muttering incomprehensible words while gazing outside. It seemed like she was having a conversation with someone in her head, but Emmy couldn't understand what she was saying at all. Making sure not to make any noise and alert Katie to her presence, Emmy quietly retreated and returned to her room. As she lay back in bed, her mind was still preoccupied with thoughts about what Katie had been saying. She pondered whether it was truly for the best that Katie joined their party. Now that the party was finally shaping up, she didn't know what to say to Janet and Vince. She couldn't help but think about Russell and what he would have done in this situation. The next day, the party went to the Hammond Adventurers Guild and were surprised to see so many people gathered there. Vince wondered why it was so noisy in the morning. They overheard other adventurers talking about dwarves' men bringing something amazing to the guild and causing a scene about it. Upon inquiry, they learned that the amazing material was none other than the fire dragon scales. Emmy's mind raced with thoughts. A dragon was the strongest monster there was, a legendary creature. There were rumors that if they descended deeper into the dungeon floors, they would eventually encounter more powerful monsters. So, it was true that dragons really existed in the lower levels of the dungeon. Katie approached the man and asked if he had any evidence to support such claims. The quest dwarf, shouting at the top of his lungs, insisted that if it were true, he must have an excellent eye for these things. She turned to Vince and declared that they were going to acquire the armor no matter what. Armor made from dragon parts provided fire resistance, making it a top priority despite the splendor of other equipment. Vince, looking at their party funds, doubted they could afford such an expensive item if it was indeed rare. Despite being a hero party, they were still newcomers to adventuring. Katie smiled and suggested they only had one choice, to earn enough money until they could afford the armor. As they ventured deeper into the dungeon, they encountered a giant monster. Katie requested Emmy to cover Vince while she attacked. Swiftly utilizing her magic, she defeated the monster with ease. Afterward, she turned to Vince and Emmy, asking how she had performed. She was relieved to see that the two of them were unharmed. Katie began muttering strange words again, as if conversing with someone inside her own head. Emmy was really disturbed by this behavior, and even Janet noticed her distressed expression, but chose to remain silent. After they exited the dungeon, Janet approached Emmy to discuss the issue. Emmy, in good spirits, initially praised Janet for her exceptional healing skills. However, Janet suddenly asked if there was any problem with her. Emmy was taken aback, but decided to seize the opportunity to share her concerns about Katie. She wanted to tell Janet about what she had witnessed the previous night, and how Katie always seemed to be involved in mysterious things, which made her uneasy. Meanwhile, Sibylla informed Russell that they were done acquiring new equipment for the time being. Russell thanked her for helping him prepare for the upcoming fight so meticulously. Now armed with a sword and shield made from parts of a fire dragon, he was determined to demonstrate their true strengths to the floor boss. The Demon King would be no exception. Russell was now ready and determined to face both challenges head-on. After completing their dungeon expedition, the group exchanged only the essential words as they made their way back to the inn. Vince announced that they would resume their activities the next day, picking up from where they left off today. Emmy acknowledged their accomplishments and suggested they take a well-deserved rest. However, Vince's tone turned hostile as he glanced at Russell, insinuating that some members of the group hadn't exerted themselves at all. Russell understood the underlying tension and felt the weight of his own ineffectiveness. He had spent the day watching his companions fight monsters, feeling left behind as they gained experience and leveled up. Russell grappled with frustration and a sense of purposelessness. As a saint with only healing powers, he struggled to find a way to contribute meaningfully to the party. Feeling clueless and isolated, he wondered how he could ever catch up. Despite their past camaraderie and mutual support, he couldn't shake the feeling of being a burden. Memories of Amy's caring gestures, like fussing over a small cut, only served to highlight his current predicament. As Russell awoke from his nightmare, he found himself unable to recall its details, only the lingering sense of dread. Peering out the window, he noticed the faint light of dawn, reminiscent of twilight, which brought to mind Sibylla, the self-proclaimed goddess of twilight. It was through his contract with her that he, a saint, had gained the mage lord profession and the ability to wield dark magic. Now awake, sleep eluded him, so he ventured out of his room, drawn toward a source of light. Outside, he encountered two girls conversing. One of them, Frederica, was a familiar face from his past. Surprised to see Russell, Frederica approached him, expressing disbelief at his presence. With a somber tone, she remarked on the changes in him, conveying her disappointment. Their exchange was interrupted by the arrival of Grandma Gemma. Russell wondered if she had divulged the details of his recent conflicts to Frederica. Gemma affirmed that Frederica had been looking out for Russell since childhood, so she would have definitely noticed the changes in him. With a calm demeanor, Russell assured them that he was no longer affected by what Vince and the others had done to him. Gemma remarked on his resilience, a sentiment echoed by Frederica. She fondly recalled Russell's timid nature as a child, always trailing behind her, and marveled at his transformation into a strong man. Despite feeling embarrassed by her praise, Russell reflected on the passage of 10 years. While Frederica insisted it felt like just yesterday. Their conversation was interrupted by Sibylla's arrival, wearing a smirk that Russell found irritating. Reacting instinctively, he flicked her forehead, causing her to yelp in pain. Apologizing for his actions, Russell greeted her and Frederica, who returned the greeting with a warm smile. Sibylla teasingly remarked on Frederica's sudden protective behavior towards Russell, to his confusion. He couldn't fathom how the pious Frederica could imagine Sibylla as anything other than a quirky individual, let alone a real goddess. Leaving the orphanage, Frederica inquired if they were heading to the dungeon again that day. Russell affirmed their mission, stating that they couldn't allow the dungeon's monsters to remain unchecked any longer. Before parting ways, Frederica embraced Russell gently, urging him to return safely. Russell reassured her, expressing confidence in both his abilities as a saint and the new equipment provided by Sibylla. With a sense of determination, they set off for another day of dungeon exploration, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As they departed, Grandma Gemma wore a worried expression, advising Russell to avoid any reckless actions and ensure his safe return. Russell reassured them both, promising to return unharmed, and they set off on their journey. After some time, Sibylla affectionately remarked on how loved Russell was by others. Russell proudly acknowledged that he received more love than he felt he deserved. Despite not knowing his parents' faces as a child and having nowhere else to go, he always found solace at the orphanage, surrounded by people who cared for him. He was determined to protect the orphanage at all costs and not let anyone threaten it. Eventually, they reached the familiar door leading to the second phase of the Adoria dungeon. Sibylla asked Russell if he was ready to proceed, explaining that beyond the door likely awaited the floor's boss. Russell affirmed his readiness, and as they entered, they were immediately met with a noise and a sense of danger from behind, just as Sibylla had predicted. The living armor of Oblivion, the second phase boss, emerged before them. Reacting swiftly, Russell prepared to fight, utilizing his enchant dark magic. Sibylla urged him to maintain his guard, and Russell unleashed his dark sphere attack. However, the armor deftly evaded the attack, showcasing its speed and agility. Russell realized that the armor's reputation as a formidable foe was well-deserved. Suddenly, the armor charged toward Russell at high speed. Sensing the imminent danger, Russell blocked the attack with his sword, only to discover it was a feint as the armor swiftly changed direction for another assault. Sibylla intervened just in time, creating a stone wall to shield Russell from harm, showcasing her quick thinking saving him from the oncoming threat. With a gentle smile, Sibylla reminded Russell not to let the enemy get behind him, and he thanked her for once again saving him from harm. He couldn't help but appreciate her precise support, arriving just in time to thwart an attack from behind. Russell realized that Sibylla was indeed reliable, a fact that he hadn't fully recognized before. However, the living armor continued to prove itself as a formidable adversary, displaying remarkable agility and endurance. It was exactly the type of excessively evasive enemy that August had warned him about. Recognizing the challenge they faced, Russell decided to entrust the defense to Sibylla, making her proud that he was finally willing to rely on her abilities. Utilizing his repetitive dark sphere magic once again, Russell surrounded the living armor from all directions. To their surprise, the living armor changed tactics, leaping into the air and aiming directly at Sibylla instead of Russell. Sibylla attempted to counter with her flare sword magic, but the armor deftly dodged the attack. She realized that the enemy had been biding its time, concealing its true strength until the opportune moment. With their combined efforts, they finally managed to defeat the living armor. As they observed the motionless body of their fallen foe, Russell couldn't shake the feeling that the floor boss for these lower levels was unusually strong. He praised Sibylla for her magic, expressing his gratitude for her invaluable support in battle. Suddenly, they sensed a presence behind them. Sibylla whispered to Russell that it was time to enact Plan B, surprised that their particular enemy had chosen this moment to appear. Russell agreed, noting that his previous use of dark magic had drained him quickly, but had also proven incredibly destructive. To their shock, they realized that the corpse of the living armor had disappeared, indicating a sinister turn of events. It seemed that their encounter with the living armor was merely a prelude to an even greater challenge, the appearance of the Demon King himself. The Demon King acknowledged Russell's skill, but noted his exhaustion after using so much dark magic, setting the stage for a daunting confrontation. The Demon King remarked that the living armor of Oblivion was weakened, and acknowledged the horrifying power of Russell's dark magic. Russell questioned who had informed the Demon King about his abilities, but the Demon King evaded the question, laughing instead. He proposed having a conversation, stating that if Russell was feeling well, they could chat. But if Russell's victory was already certain, it would be less enjoyable. The Demon King revealed that he had come to the dungeon based on a friend's recommendation. When Russell mentioned the recommendation possibly coming from the Dungeon King's father, the Demon King appeared shaken but quickly recovered, laughing it off. He explained that they all lived in the same realm and discussed matters together, indicating that they were all interconnected. Russell pondered how the Demon Kings collaborated and strategized, likely devising new dungeons while they gathered. The Demon King remarked on the unexpected turn of events, with Russell defeating the floor boss and becoming an apprentice. He mentioned a rule that allowed for the addition of more bosses, implying that their encounter was part of a larger scheme. As Russell examined the purple stone amidst the red rock, he pondered its presence. Sibylla explained that the upper layers consisted of ordinary rocks, while the middle layers appeared blue and the lower layers were red. The deepest layer, known as the Demon Realm, was characterized by purple stones. Observing a pile of purple stones, Russell recalled that Sibylla had created a stone wall with the ground, wondering why the stones had turned purple. Suddenly, a realization struck him, and he asked the Demon King if he had changed the color of the ground. The Demon King chuckled and confirmed his suspicion. Russell observed as purple walls emerged between the red ones, indicating that the dungeon was being created. The Demon King revealed that the entire floor had been crafted to deceive Russell into believing it was the lowest layer. Understanding the situation, Russell realized that the living armor of Oblivion was so formidable because it was the floor boss of the lowest layer. The Demon King's manipulation extended further as he planted doubts in Russell's mind about Sibylla. He questioned whether Russell truly believed that the woman standing behind him was his ally. Sibylla remained silent, adding to Russell's uncertainty. The Demon King, realizing that his attempts to persuade Russell were futile, expressed frustration at the situation. He lamented the madness of all the players involved in the game. The Demon King scoffed at the notion of Russell resorting to using an enchantment as a last resort after exhausting his magical power. Feeling that the time had come for the final showdown, the Demon King declared that Russell should behold his true form before their impending battle. With anticipation, he wondered how long Russell would be able to endure once the true excitement commenced. The Demon King morphed into a terrifying, monstrous form, a sight that Russell had never encountered. With relentless fury, the Demon King unleashed a barrage of fiery projectiles, leaving Russell with no refuge. Yet, Russell deftly parried the onslaught with his trusty sword, his resolve unyielding. Observing Russell's resilience, the Demon King unleashed a devastating fire strike, enveloping the surroundings in searing heat. Despite his sturdy equipment, fortified with the essence of a dragon's blood and his resilient robe, Russell still felt the intense burn, realizing the limitations of the human body compared to the formidable fire dragon. Meanwhile, Sibylla struggled against the oppressive heat, providing a distraction for Russell to exploit. Seizing the opportunity, Russell tapped into his dark magic, honing in on the Demon King's vulnerability, the dungeon core. The Demon King, taken aback by Russell's knowledge, was left incredulous at how his adversary had uncovered such a crucial detail. With unruffled composure, Russell calmly declared his status as a saint, explaining that his proficiency in healing magic granted him insight into the Demon King's tactics. Moreover, through the teachings of Sibylla, he had mastered techniques to overcome obstacles, even while enduring the searing pain inflicted upon his throat. The Demon King, taken aback by this revelation, questioned why a saint was not accompanying the hero. Russell's response, laced with strategic foresight, revealed their meticulous planning. Sibylla had foreseen the possibility of confronting both the floor boss and the Demon King successively, thus prompting Russell to enact their prepared strategy. Aware of the Demon King's penchant for altering the battlefield, they had anticipated his moves. Sibylla further elucidated that after expending considerable magical energy against the floor boss, any ordinary caster would succumb to exhaustion. Hence, the Demon King's guard faltered, leaving him vulnerable with his back exposed to Russell and his vital points laid bare. Russell's smile widened as he realized that the Demon King had unwittingly fallen into Sibylla's meticulously crafted plan. With a taunting remark, Russell branded the Demon King a loser, further fueling his frustration. Reflecting on his past, Russell marveled at how far he had come from being solely capable of healing magic to now wielding the power of the Black Kite Saint bestowed upon him by his cunning goddess. Executing his dark superhero magic once more, Russell ensnared the Demon King in an inescapable vortex of darkness, leaving him cornered and helpless. Sibylla, taking Russell's praise and stride, acknowledged her role in devising the strategy, but recognized Russell's unparalleled mastery of magic as the driving force behind its success. Russell reveled in his newfound strength and determination. Memories of his past achievements and the desire for recognition resurfaced briefly before he refocused on the present confrontation. Meanwhile, the infuriated Demon King, determined not to be outwitted again, unleashed a poison mist to weaken his adversaries. However, Russell calmly reminded him of his status as a saint, capable of recovering effortlessly, thus nullifying the Demon King's offensive tactics. The Demon King declares, "And so you wield your blade as the goddess commands." He really doesn't seem to like that Sibylla's using me, Russell thought, picking up on the unspoken tension. Then, without warning, Sibylla made a sudden, swift move. After that, Russell thought to himself, does Sibylla have some kind of plan? She hasn't told me what to do so far. In that moment of uncertainty, Russell suddenly spoke, his voice cutting through the tension. Why do you hate the goddess so much? And the hero too? His words seemed to unsettle the Demon King, who appeared momentarily confused. Why? The Demon King replied, as if trying to grasp the reason himself. Then the Demon King regained his composure and said, "Hey, I came all this way so I could kill the hero. Now, I'm in this sorry state." Russell responded calmly, "That's not the answer I was looking for, though." He then added with a warning tone, "You should never drop your guard." As the Demon King prepared to strike at Russell, Sibylla suddenly intervened, launching an attack against the Demon King. "Obviously I can cast chantlessly too," she said. Sibylla reminds him of her words. "You hold on to the ace up your sleeve until the last moment." Sibylla chuckles and says you have to learn when to look around. Russell, processing everything in his mind, thought, "I get it." Sibylla went out of her way to shout out her spell to set this up. She completely outplayed the Demon King. This woman's terrifying, a true strategist through and through. The Demon King, now furious, roared, "How dare a mere goddess?" But Sibylla, unfazed, retorted, "You're stupid, so I'll tell you. Talkers are usually idiots. This has been a learning experience." Enraged beyond control, the Demon King launched a fierce attack at Sibylla. Russell, seeing the danger, shouted, "Sibylla!" Just as the Demon King was about to reach her, Russell observed, "She's thought this through so well." In his mind, Russell knew, Sibylla really is the best partner. Thanks to this huge opening she's given me, I'm guaranteed to hit him with this complicated spell. With that, Russell activated his skill, Abyssal Nail. After Russell unleashed his most powerful attack, the Demon King suddenly fell, defeated. The once formidable ruler was now lifeless, his body crumpling to the ground. Russell stood over the fallen Demon King and said, "Thanks for putting such a strong boss on the lowest level. Thanks to that, the living armor of oblivion, I not only did I turn into a level 10 Twilight Mage Lord, but I also learned a new spell. About Sibylla's words, that really is good advice." He paused, then added with a smirk, "What do you think? How's the punch from dark magic your plan empowered?" The Demon King, barely clinging to consciousness, attempted to speak. Russell looked down at the Demon King and said, It seems he can't answer anymore. Wow, this is the first time I've seen Abyssal Nail double casted. That was amazing. If it weren't for the opening you gave me, it would never have hit twice." Sibylla said, "In all my years, only the Black Kite Saint could pull this off in a single strike. You're incredible, Russell." Russell smiled and replied, "What about you? I never thought you'd pull off that chantless at the perfect moment. To think you'd let him go like that. I never expected anything less from you." With a shared sense of triumph, Sibylla and Russell raised their hands into the air in celebration. Sibylla then said, "You really did great. Changing jobs to Twilight Mage Lord and then taking down the Demon King in 3 days? That's a new record, even for me." Russell chuckled and said, "If you say so, then I guess it's true. It feels pretty good." In his mind, Russell thought, I really can pull something like this off. Leveling up as Twilight Mage Lord while still being a saint, it feels weird." Sibylla added, "You've earned top marks. It looks like I've created something crazy here if I do say so myself." Sibylla suddenly turned her head behind, followed by Russell. They were both really shocked to see that the Demon King was gone. While the Demon Lord fled towards the exit, he muttered to himself, "I left behind an afterimage of a core. I need to move." As he ran, he reflected on the phrase he had heard earlier, "You hold on to the ace up your sleeve until the last moment." He chuckled. "This has been quite an experience. Ha ha ha, it's been a lot of fun." Meanwhile, Sibylla shouted urgently to Russell, "Russell, run!" The Demon Lord, now determined to self-destruct. As Russell ran, he said, "Seriously?" Just as he spoke, the Demon Lord self-destructed, causing a massive explosion. After the explosion, Sibylla called out, "We're almost at the first floor. Russell, heal me quickly." Russell cast his spell, Extra Healing, and Sibylla sighed in relief. "Thank goodness it restores your stamina too. With this, we'll almost reach the entrance." They hurried out of the dungeon, and as they threw the exit, Sibylla shouted, "Russell, close it!" Russell used his Abyssal Nail spell to seal the dungeon gate. The rocks crumbled and the entrance was sealed. Sibylla then said, "Wait, oh no, we can't stop that." They realized the magical blast was still a threat. If a magical blast that strong goes off, we're in danger of being caught in the explosion. Finally, the magic coating massively exploding. Russell heard the familiar voice of Amy and quickly caught her body and put her on his lap. As he looked at her, he thought, "Why are you here, Amy? This isn't the time for asking this." He immediately cast Extra Healing, then continued with his cure spell to tend to her wounds. Amy tried to speak, but no words came out. Russell, puzzled, wondered, "Why is this so strange? Isn't my saintly power supposed to include all kinds of healing?" Turning to Sibylla, he asked, "Sibylla, Amy is my childhood friend and she doesn't open her eyes. Can you check on her?" Sibylla examined Amy and said, "Calm down. Your saintly powers are working well, but I'm curious why I can't sense any life energy from her. It's as if she has no will to live. Russell was shocked. She has no will to live? He thought, struggling to understand the gravity of the situation. Then we move to Amy's past, and we see her happy face. I wanted to be a cute girl. I've always wanted to be a princess for just one person. The scene shifts to the morning after a conversation with Janet. Amy wakes up and says, I actually slept. I couldn't rest at all while worrying about Kathy. I felt really relaxed after talking to Janet. She'll probably think through all that stuff I don't fully understand. Janet's smart, but I feel bad having her worry about me. It's been a while since I felt so refreshed. I was always so depressed after Russell was kicked out of the party, though I'm still not over all of it. But Russell, I'll do my best. Just then, Janet enters Amy's room and says, Amy, you're awake? Good morning. Amy responds, Morning, Janet. And Janet makes sure that Amy looks fine now. Janet then says, You slept so soundly. We couldn't wake you up. Hurry up and get dressed or you'll miss breakfast. Amy responded, What? Oh no, food is my happiness. At breakfast, the party gathered together. Katie greeted them. Good morning, Amy, Janet. Amy chimed in. Good morning, Katie. Also with an awkward tone, she greeted the hero. Morning, Vince. During breakfast, Amy reflected, Since the incident with Russell, things have been tense between Vince and her. She can't bring herself to like Vince after what happened with Russell. Katie noticed the tension and asked, Aren't you two talking much? Vince, feeling a bit awkward, responded, Oh well, I'm used to it. Kathy said, You're used to it. This kind of relationship is also quite nice. Amy thought, I think Kathy is misunderstanding something. Kathy said, Amy, did you happen to think, oh, I want to join in the talk too? Amy then said, No, that's not it. We're always together, right? Yes, always together. Kathy responded, Amy, I have something I want to talk to you about. Do you have a moment after we eat? Amy, curious about Kathy's interest, thought, Why does Kathy seem so eager? I didn't realize it would be such a big deal. Kathy then said, I'm going to teach you a special skill that's different from magical protection and coding. It's a unique paladin skill. Amy asked, A skill for paladin? Kathy replied, Yes. The last time you tried a paladin skill, it wasn't great, but after seeing you at breakfast, I'm sure you'll be able to master it. Amy agreed. All right, let's start. As Kathy explained, Amy thought, I shouldn't have listened. Now I realize it's too late. I understand the skill, the paladin role, and the defensive power doesn't quite fit as a party's defensive anchor. Kathy continued, Paladins have this special skill. When you activate it, your shield will glow and become extremely powerful. Even the strongest enemies are sent flying. To activate it, you just need to be aware of the person you care about. Kathy smiles. One good intention is all you need, but suddenly Amy slammed the table. Kathy was shocked and exclaimed, Amy, what's happening? Amy quickly apologized. I'm sorry, and ran off. That time, as we tested Russell's strength, I stood there with my shield up, but when the sword struck, my eyes met Russell's. It had been a while since I saw his face up so close. I thought he looked really cool. Russell got kicked out because I had done half the job of protecting him, making things difficult for him. Even though I resisted kicking him out, I stood there as Vince wanted, and I blasted him away by getting love-struck. Amy then wrote a letter and handed it to Janet. Janet looked confused as Amy said, Read this somewhere. People won't see you. Burn it when you're done. I think you would have done that even if I hadn't asked. Janet replied, Amy, seriously, what's wrong? Then Janet ran after Amy, who was already fleeing. Janet called out, Amy, wait, what's happening? We then see Amy alone in the forest, facing a pack of wolves. She slashed at them, and almost all the wolves fell instantly. Laughing, she said, I cleaved them in half. This is definitely the power of someone blessed with the paladin job, power that Russell didn't get, even though he was the best with the sword out of all of us. As she continued to defeat the wolves, Amy reflected, I wanted to be a cute girl. I've always wanted to be a princess for just one person. All for just one person. Amy then recalled their past. Back when they were still 9, Russell began to act a bit more mature. One day, he asked Frederica for a favor. Frederica, I want to help with the cooking. I saw this and felt I couldn't compete with the two of them while they were cooking, so I spied on them from the shadows. The moment Amy saw blood dripping from Russell's finger, she felt a deep scared. The blood wouldn't stop, and she worried, what if Russell dies? Tears streamed down her face as she thought back to how she hadn't changed at all since then. She would rather endure severe injury herself than let Russell get even a small cut. This is why she became a paladin. She didn't want him to suffer any harm. She wanted to protect him. She thought if Russell used a staff instead of a sword, he wouldn't be on the front lines. So she pushed him to the back line and wouldn't be able to fight. Also, he wasn't leveling up and was falling behind. She felt deeply sorry. and suddenly Amy's shield began to glow and flash, instantly killing the wolves. She was shocked and remembered Katie's words. To activate it, you just need to be conscious of the person you like. Reflecting, even now, the power I gained to protect Russell only ended up hurting him. It's all my fault. Amy sobbed. I'm sorry, Russell. I'm really sorry. I was the one who ruined it all. Amy continued to cry and apologize. In her mind, she thought, I don't have the right to criticize Vince, suspect Katie, or count on Janet. I need to apologize to Russell right now. I'll be his shield. I don't deserve his love, but as long as we're together, I don't care if we don't talk. I only want one thing, to die as his shield. Suddenly, the explosion from the dungeon hit Amy, but she used her shield to protect herself. Flashbacks of her childhood appeared. Russell patted her head and said, You are cute. I think you can be a princess. The scene shifted to the present, where Russell held Amy on his lap and shouted her name, Amy! The manga ends with a close-up of Amy shedding a tear.